Chapter 636. This is the best place you can find? Asta turned around slowly and paced back and forth as he sized up the entire study. Of course, welcome to Star Lake Castle. Thales walked to the window and looked at the lake of stars under the moonlight. He spread his arms in a bold and imposing manner, looking like an overlord. A fortress that belongs solely to me. Secretive, tranquil, remote, safe. Before Thales could finish speaking, a strange sound came from the ceiling. It was a creaking sound, a clanging sound, and a rumbling sound that traveled from one end to the other. Asta glanced at the ceiling expressionlessly. This made the Duke of Star Lake feel a little embarrassed. It perfectly meets the requirements in your last letter. It's the best place for us to meet. Thales regained his composure and calmness. His voice rose above the strange sound of the ceiling. Not only is it far from Renaissance Palace, it also comes with natural scenery. Before he could finish his words, he heard a loud crash above his head. Shaw, a cloud of dust fell from the cracks in the ceiling and covered Thales' head and face, who was pretending to be confident. Asta, on the other hand, was still at ease. He stood with his hands behind his back, untainted by even a speck of dust. Before the dust and gravel could land on him, they were blocked by a transparent barrier. All right, it's just a small fly in the ointment. Thales' calmness disappeared. Covered in dirt, he coughed and patted off the dust in a disheveled manner. But don't worry, we've already sent people to the nearby villages and towns to buy cat and rat poison. Plan B is to go to Eternal Star City and hire a professional rat catcher. Without tearing down the roof. The air mystic ignored him and turned to look at his surroundings. The furnishings in the study were old and faded. Occasionally, there were cobwebs and moths in the corners. A wooden window that was open to the outside was faintly moaning in the wind, as if it was about to fall. Thales patted the top of his head until it returned to its original color. He walked to the desk and sat down calmly. Everything is in order, everything is under control. Crack! Before he could finish, the chair he was sitting on made a crisp sound. Thales became shorter and slanted to the side. The teenager had no choice but to grab onto the table in a flustered yet skillful manner to prevent himself from slipping. Damn it, the carpenters in the field just came to fix it the day before yesterday. The prince swore angrily. Asta squinted at him and said nothing. Okay, I know. Thales gave up on defending himself and sighed heavily. The Star Lake Castle has just started, and the conditions are limited, but don't worry. He reached out and grabbed the sky blue invitation on the table. He folded it back and forth in a practiced manner. Then, he bent down and stuffed it under the collapsed leg of the chair. Our momentum is good, and we have a lot of room for development. Thales twisted his buttocks to make sure that the chair was stable. Only then did he stand up and sit properly. However, he was shocked to find that the air mystic was already sitting in front of the study table. His gaze was dark and calm. I won't invite you to sit down anyway. The Duke of Star Lake pouted sourly, feeling helpless and envious. You brought your own chair. But Asta did not respond to his joke. The mystic gently pointed at the window, and the mountain wind, which had been making rattling noises, immediately stopped. Asta's tone was gentle and his voice was pleasant. You're different. What? Asta's tone was cold, and the mysterious blue light in his eyes seemed to have some power. I mean, you're different. Thales sneered. Yes, I've grown up. The corners of Thales' lips curled up. He leaned back and crossed his arms. By the way, after returning to the country, you're probably the 20th person to say this to me. Unfortunately, only the top 19 get a prize. Asta did not move. Only his eyes looked straight into Thales' eyes. No. The air mystic's voice was mechanical and hollow. Child, you are far from being as relaxed as you appear on the surface. On the contrary, at this very moment, you are impetuous, confused and uneasy. Troubled by a fog that I can't see clearly. Thales subconsciously stopped smiling. Impetuous, confused, and uneasy. His pocket, which contained the covenant ring, suddenly felt heavy. The place where you've become different is in the depths. The mystic was still staring at Thales. A strange blue light overflowed from his pupils and filled his entire eye sockets. Deeper. The deepest. At that moment, Thales subconsciously tensed up. He had the illusion that his soul was being peeped at. The sin of hell's river surged uneasily. God! What? Thales was stunned. When you hear this word, the mystic said coldly, what do you think of? Thales came to his senses. This was the training they did in Dragon Cloud City. But, answer me now. Asta's attitude was uncharacteristically strict, almost like a command. God. Damn it. We haven't seen each other for a long time. We should at least exchange some pleasantries. But we're already taking a test in class? Seeing that the mystic was insistent, Thales could only sigh and answer the question. Indistinct, illusory, the teenager lazily muttered the words God. He racked his brain and said whatever came to his mind. Indistinct, distant. But as he spoke, Thales felt a little strange. It seems to be there, but it isn't. The future of Tathagata is real, but it can't be that the coming has already come. Thales frowned. Strange, I used to describe these things. But Asta did not allow him to think too much. The world. The air mystic spoke quickly, and his words were unprecedentedly heavy. He seemed to be urging Thales. The world, what will you think of first? Quickly. Thales' expression became solemn. Everything, accommodate, contain, fill. The words popped up from the bottom of Thales' heart, making him even more puzzled. Extend, remake, continue, all kinds of things everywhere. Damn it, why can't I say a complete sentence in such a short time? Why are all these disjointed words appearing in my mind? Thales wanted to continue, but Asta raised his finger gently. Stop. Thales asked in surprise. Mr. Sakern, what happened? I think. The mystic raised his head. His eyes shone like blue lightning. You're indeed different. Thales' heart sank. Asta stared at him solemnly. A few months ago, a mystic tried to knock on the door, the air mystic said in a deep voice. But it was different from the time you were in Dragon Cloud City. This time, it was very cautious. A few months ago, knocking on the door. Thales' heart tightened. Cautious? The mystic nodded. It was like standing in front of the door, touching the door with a finger, and withdrawing it before knocking even once. It was more like a test. The scene in the prison of bones appeared before his eyes. Thales gulped. Asta stared outside the window. His gaze was unfocused. It even made me think that it was an illusion for a while. But he immediately turned his head and looked at Thales, who was still feeling uneasy. At first, I didn't think it was you, because only a complete mystic can have that kind of control. But now, after I saw you again, Asta repeated his conclusion solemnly. You're different, aren't you? Thales could only sigh deeply, feeling as if he was exposed for doing something bad. Yes. Asta was expressionless. I warned you before, it's very dangerous to show mystic energy in front of others. Thales nodded helplessly. I ran into trouble. I had no choice, so I tried, but I found that I kept evolving and could not stop. Reckless. Thales was a little unhappy, but he persisted. At first, I was close to knocking on the door, but thanks to... He stopped talking and thought of the mystic at the critical realm. I am your earliest senior. The worst role model. The worst future. Asta's words seemed to come from afar. Thanks to what? Thales returned to his sight, but what appeared in his mind was another mystic's reminder. Be careful of Asta. Thales gulped and forced a smile. It's all thanks to you, Mr. Sakern. A blue light flashed in Asta's eyes. Those questions of yours, gods, the world, they suddenly appeared, Thales said cautiously. With each question, I became a little more clear-headed, and in the end, I came back. The mystic was silent for a while. That's it? Nothing else? Maybe. Thales recalled the technique he used when facing the Black Prophet and tried not to lie. But, like a dream, everything is vague and hazy. After I wake up, I don't remember. Asta was silent for a long time. Matter, observation, chaos, purity, the mystic said faintly. Your progress is much faster than I expected. Matter, observation. Mind saying more? But Asta only raised his finger slightly. The air around him became fresh and cold. It went straight into his lungs, causing Thales to shiver and become much more clear-headed. What's going on? Get rid of all distracting thoughts. Asta said solemnly. Now, every time I say a word you have to answer with another word, the one you think of first. Do not hesitate, Do not hesitate. Answer with your instincts. Thales could only nod while shivering. Sun? Asda asked. Shatter, Thales quickly answered. Wait, destruction? Thales came to his senses and frowned. How could it be this? If he was given a few more seconds, he would definitely answer something else, such as heat, endless, light, eternity, and so on. But shatter? Starry sky. Touch. Time. Destruction. Fog. End. Pause. Death. Oblivion. Sky. Imprisonment. Power. At that moment, Thales opened his mouth to speak, but his mind went blank. Power? What should power be connected to? Why didn't he think of it? He gritted his teeth and dug out a relevant term from his memory. Power of eradication. Asda lowered his finger. The air around them became warm again. The last one doesn't count, the air mystic said faintly. You hesitated. Thales was silent. He did not need to ask to know that these answers were not quite right. What is this? Primordial question. This is the name Taurus gave it later. It was also the test he first designed. Asda did not hide anything and answered straightforwardly. People first discover the abnormalities of mystics not through their abilities, but through their thoughts and knowledge. Hearing the familiar name, Thales rolled his eyes. Who is Taurus? A senior. Asda did not want to say more. Because of the mystic ability First Covenant, I cannot delve into your mystic ability. I can only use a series of the most primitive images to explore your understanding of external objects and identify the stage of your mystic ability advancement. It is like using a needle to prick the skin and bring out the blood. I obtain a diagnosis with the least amount of damage and cost. Primordial question. Thales probed. So what is your diagnosis? Am I still alive and well, eating and drinking well? Or am I in the late stages of my illness and am preparing for my funeral? The air mystic shook his head. I do not know. Obviously, you have already come into contact with mystic ability when you lost control. That is why your answer changed. This is proof that you have reached the thing stage. We usually call it contactee. But the problem is, in history, there has never been a case of someone coming into contact with mystic ability after knocking on the door. Asda thought silently. Just like a beginner without any foundation, only after completing a series of complicated and advanced calculations, he learned that 1 + 1 = 2. Contactee. Thales ruminated on this word. At the same time, he compared it with the knowledge he heard when he knocked on the door. To be precise, it was from the kind senior named Taurus, whose face he could not see clearly. Asda continued. But you are very lucky. But you're very lucky. You lost control and evolved at the thing stage, but you were able to return in time from the critical point of knocking on the door. In history, half of those who came into contact with the door intentionally or unintentionally became idiots, lunatics, or even monsters. Thales frowned. Idiots, lunatics, monsters? What about the other half? Asda shook his head. I do not know. They disappeared. Disappeared. Thales felt a chill in his heart. Then, under what circumstances do I need to worry? When one day, I answer every primitive question with F***CKU? Asda turned around and glanced at Thales. His glance was very strange, even unfamiliar. When I am completely unable to understand or even hear your answer, the mystic said faintly. Unable to understand or hear. Thales was puzzled. I don't understand? Asda nodded. That's it. Thales became even more puzzled. What? But in the next second, the mystic changed the topic. His tone was cold. And that's right. If someone really dares to answer me with vulgarities, you should really be worried. Worried about my temper. Thales shrank his head. Then, I am already a so-called contactee. What should I do next? I do not know. Oh, you do not know what? Thales widened his eyes. Asda shook his head. Based on the examples I know, from this step onwards, the contactee of mystic energy must learn to observe step by step while he meticulously prepares to lose control of mystic energy. He must resist the temptation and impulse of blindly evolving. Only then can he reach the level of observation and become an epiphany. Wait. There are too many unfamiliar terms. I need to find a notebook. But just as Thales reached for the pen, a breeze blew the pen and paper off the table. Thales raised his head gloomily and looked at the indifferent Asda. All right, I can't leave a record. As for the epiphany, they must carefully and restrain themselves from trying to evolve. During the evolution, they will see themselves clearly, search for a specific threshold, and enter the state of chaos. We call them fused. The fused will take the last dangerous step. They will reach out and knock on the door for the first time, break through the threshold, and completely integrate into their original state, which is the level of purity, the air mystic said softly. If they succeed, they can find and define their own name of origin, which is the mystic. At this point, Asda paused for a moment. But, Thales came to his senses and said in a daze, but I have already lost control, evolved and even knocked on the door. So what does this count as? Exactly. Asda nodded. So, normal standards cannot define your stage and level. They are not applicable. Then what should we do? It doesn't matter, the mystic said faintly. Although mystics who do not take the normal path are rare, there are still a few. One or two? When he heard that he could still be saved, Thales' spirits rose. Is that so? Can we refer to them? No. What? Why? What is the first pact of mystic energy? Learn from each other? Say it again. The air around them froze, making it difficult to breathe. And not delving into each other's affairs. Very well. The airflow returned to normal. So if you don't know what to do next, then what use do I have for you? Say it again? I mean, respected Mr. Sakern, may I know how you intend to explore the unknown and guide me step by step? Asda was silent. He looked at the moonlight outside the window. I don't know. But we can explore together. So, Thales, let me ask you again. Are you willing to let go of worldly restraints and come with me? The mystic said faintly. The path of mystic energy is extremely arduous and dangerous. We need to explore the unknown with more freedom and efficiency. F*CK. Here it goes again. Thales immediately became vigilant, preventing himself from flying out of the castle again, just like in Dragon Cloud City. But fortunately, Asda was no longer so violent when communicating with him. He no longer dragged him out to be a human kite at the slightest disagreement. But we talked about this 7 years ago, and you agreed, Thales said sternly. If mystics do not want to be hated by the world and be beaten by everyone, and do not want to be called a calamity, then we have to use another method. The crown in my left hand, and mystic energy in my right. Asda's words were concise, and he summarized his explanation in one sentence. I can somewhat understand your commendable but childish ideals. I also more or less understand your naivety in wanting to have the best of both worlds, or your reluctance to leave when you are in a high position, and your greed for power. Thales could not help but raise his eyebrows. But you think this way, child, because you still do not understand mystic energy. That is also because you have always been secretive and unwilling to reveal everything, Thales immediately retorted. Asda was silent for a while before he changed the topic. Then why don't you think about it from another angle? On this trip back, since you knocked on the door, did anyone find anything wrong with it, or even suspect your identity? If anyone found anything wrong with it, and suspected my identity, Thales shuddered. A few faces floated in his mind. Quick Rope. The former prisoners of the Royal Guards, led by Barney Jr. and Zakriel. Thales looked into Asda's eyes, forced a smile, and told the truth. Yes. The air mystic stared at him quietly. In Thales' eyes, the occasional flash of blue light in the air mystic's eyes was filled with, I knew it. Give me their names and information. I will help you wrap up. Wrap up. Thales' heart skipped a beat. The image of Quick Rope being made into a human meatball appeared in his mind. Thank you, but I have already taken care of it. The prince pretended to be calm. It is a pity, but also very unfortunate. Those who know my secret. Thales could not help but imagine Shadow Shield Stake's expression. A sinister smile appeared on his face. They will never be able to tell anyone else. This time, Asda did not answer immediately. Instead, he stared at him for a very, very long time. It was so long that Thales felt goosebumps. Fortunately, the mystic finally spoke, but his tone changed. Very well, you escaped this time. But what about next time? Thales tensed up. Asda said coldly, "Why do you think I disappeared all these years, and only came to you in the 6th year? Lazy? Coward? Delay? Forget? Death thread awakening?" Thales buried these speculations deep in his heart and put on a humble and eager face. Asda's pleasant voice suddenly became tense. 7 years ago, an unfamiliar rookie mystic knocked on the door blindly in the middle of the night. Also 7 years ago, Giza appeared in Dragon Cloud City and fought against the great dragon who descended from the sky. Do you really think that no one will connect the dots? Thales frowned. Such as, the 2 empresses? They are just one of them. Asda's tone was worrisome. And in the past 7 years, they have visited Dragon Cloud City countless times. Thales held his breath. During these 7 years, I had to put in a lot of effort and use every method I could think of to make them look away from you. Fortunately, you are very special. Fortunately, all the mystics believe that the person who knocks on the door definitely has a name of origin, and a brat definitely doesn't have this ability. Thales' heart sank. Fortunately. The air mystic's attitude softened. That was not the only thing that happened in the world that night. Thales looked up. What do you mean? The mystic shook his head. Swampy Land, the Sea of Eradication, the Great Desert, Sunset Forest, Rayarden, Chelan City. That night, many places were not peaceful. Dragon Cloud City and Giza were just 2 of the suspected targets. Thales was puzzled. What? Asda nodded. That's right. So sometimes I even suspect that you were not the only mystic who appeared that day. Not the only one. Thales was deep in thought. Asda snorted coldly. Of course, if there really is one, I hope he is not like you, stubborn and reckless. Thales could only show a polite smile. But you are now back in Eternal Star City. Asda spoke faster and faster, making people's hearts race. This is the center of politics that attracts the attention of the world, and you are the heir to the kingdom. Every move you make will attract attention. If you have another accident here, whether it is evolving or knocking on the door, if you attract unnecessary attention. Unnecessary attention. Thales recalled the scene at the royal banquet and could not help but clench his fists. Asda warned, "Don't worry. For the sake of your safety, reconsider my suggestion. When that time comes, it will be too late for you to leave with me." Thales was silent for a long time. For the sake of my safety. Safety. But. Thales remembered the covenant he made with the king in Ballard Room and could not help but clench his teeth. Asda quietly waited for his response. After a few seconds, Thales took a deep breath and looked up at his guide. "Thank you for the reminder. I admit that it may be safer and more convenient for a beginner to go with you." Thales paused. "But I still have a question." Asda nodded. "Very well, at least we have a pretty good consensus. Who is Fruland?" The air mystic's words came to a halt. "Fruland." Thales stared at him. But Asda did not react. He was expressionless and did not move. But Thales knew that a mystic's reaction could not be measured with common sense. Or I should change the question. Thales leaned against the desk and narrowed his eyes. "You and the sensory mystic, or should I say the former Queen Fiosa, why and how did you work together?" The silence lasted for a long time. The blue light in Asda's eyes flickered back and forth. Thales was unmoved. He gradually increased the stakes. "And how did the former 3 Disasters Alliance infiltrate Constellation's court and bewitch the former king?" Asda still did not say a word. Until the next question. Just for a legendary anti-mystic equipment that could threaten the 2 empresses? At that moment, Asda's eyes shone with a dazzling blue light. Thales had to raise his hand to block it. A few seconds later, the blue light dimmed. Like a statue, Asda regained his vitality. "Where did you hear that name?" "Damn it!" Thales put down his arm and exhaled. "Don't forget, I'm not just your student. I'm also a Jade Star. I have the crown in my left hand and mystic energy in my right." The prince shrugged and spread his arms. "I'm in such a high position, but it's not just because I'm reluctant to leave and greedy for power." Thales' smile froze. "Mr. Sakern?" The blue light in Asda's eyes flowed rapidly. "It's been a while. You've learned a lot of new things." Thales curled his lips. "Not as much as you've hidden from me, Mr. Sakern." The atmosphere in Jackal's study room suddenly became tense. The Duke of Star Lake and the mystic looked at each other in silence. But Thales was not afraid. In Ballard Room, after experiencing the difficult game with the Iron Hand King, Thales felt that he had grown. At least, he was getting better at seizing the initiative and leading the situation. Even when facing a mystic. This was the true meaning of having the crown in his left hand and mystic energy in his right hand. The sin of Hell's river surged and flowed through his body in agreement. But the teenager's gratification only lasted for 3 seconds. No. Asda snorted coldly. If you really learned of this name from someone in a high position, Thales, why do you need to ask me? It's precisely because you know nothing that you're here to sound me out and try to learn more. Thales' expression froze. The air mystic curled his lips and mocked. From this, it can be seen that you can't touch the crown with your left hand, and you can't use mystic energy with your right hand. You can't do anything with either hand. He said bluntly. A prince who has lost his power without mystic energy. In the old and dilapidated study room, Thales sat on a broken chair with a corner missing. He was silent. Actually, he did not have to be so harsh. A few seconds later, Thales sighed. All right, you're right. But the teenager's expression changed. But at least, you should know why I'm not willing to go with you, right? The mystic fell silent again. You're rebelling. I'm not telling you precisely because you're not willing to go with me. Asda opened his mouth again. There was a hint of difficulty in his words. If I can teach you all these things from the past. Thales smiled. He shook his head and leaned back. The wobbling chair let out a painful groan. So, you won't tell me the answer, will you? No. Can I ask why? No. But. No. At least. No. Asda rejected Thales' questions one after another. He raised his head and did not waver. No matter what the reason is, if you're not willing to give up your worldly ties, I won't tell you more about mystics. Thales immediately felt bored. But at least, he achieved his goal. Frulin's news had diverted his attention. The mystic no longer insisted on taking him with him. But you know, child, you always have that choice. The mystic leaned forward. His words were bewitching. I'll always be here, with an open embrace. Forever. As he listened to this familiar tone, Thales snickered. He suddenly thought of Quick Rope and Asda. Could they be a pair of golden salesmen? The former would deliver a carrot with flowery words, while the latter would wield a stick with a ferocious expression. All right, then let's each take a step back. Thales proposed a solution and set the tone for this conversation that was heading towards an unpleasant one. I won't ask you who Frulund is, and don't force me to go with you. Asda did not speak. But based on Thales' understanding of him, a certain someone was obviously not very satisfied. Thales snorted and stood up. By the way, speaking of this, I still have something to ask you. Thales walked straight to the window before turning around to look at the mystic. Asda snorted softly. Under the moonlight, the prince smiled faintly and raised his hand gently. Asterisk thud. Asterisk the chair behind the desk suddenly trembled, and a corner bent. But Asda did not pay attention to the chair. At some point in time, he had already stood up. The mystic's glowing blue eyes were fixed on Thales' hand. Between the teenager's fingers was a folded sky-blue cardboard ball. Thales smiled and waved his hand at the mystic. In the next second, the blue light in Asda's eyes suddenly intensified. Thales only felt a light breeze. He could not hold the paper ball anymore, and it flew out of his hand. The sky-blue piece of paper flew over as if it had a life of its own and stopped in front of Asda. It unfolded in the air, flattened out, and resumed the appearance of an invitation card, revealing the beautiful writing on it. Turn around. This is. Asda's eyes were obscured by the blue light. It was as if he could see through the invitation card in front of him and look at the air. No change, no trajectory, no momentum, not even. His words were emotionless, but they were filled with a strange echo. Thales revealed a mysterious smile. He bowed and spread his arms, as if he was thanking someone after a performance. The crumpled invitation card floated to the ground. The mystic turned his head and stared at Thales' right hand. Again. There was an unusual fluctuation in Asda's words. Whatever it is, do it again. Nah. The blue light in his eyes no longer flowed, and it was always bright. Of course I will. In the face of Asda's rare eagerness, the teenager was a little overwhelmed. But before that, the Duke of Starlake crossed his arms and smiled coldly. Who is Froland? Thank you for your support. I have been working hard on my writing. End of this chapter. Chapter 637. The candlelight was bright. The silence in the study lasted for a few seconds. Asta stared at Thales expressionlessly. Is this question so important that you are so eager to know? Thales smiled. Not necessarily. It depends on how much you want to see my trick. Asta lowered his head and looked at the wrinkled sky blue invitation card on the floor. This is not a deal. His tone became cold. Not to mention using your mystic energy as a bargaining chip. Then this is not a deal. Thales' smile did not change. He reacted quickly and readily accepted the mystic's advice. It is a student helping each other and learning from each other. The moment he finished speaking, Thales immediately felt that something was wrong. The air around him slowly froze. And this is not a joke either. The mystic was expressionless and spoke very slowly. Your mystic energy is strange and unpredictable. The consequences are unknown. If you are not careful, your life will be in danger. Thales raised his left hand gently. Asta's words came to an abrupt halt. The sky blue invitation card on the floor had disappeared. At that very moment, it was held between Thales' fingers. Not bad. Asta's eyes sparkled with blue light. It left a deep impression. A few months ago, when I was forced to knock on the door and learn this trick, Thales put down the invitation card in his hand, and his smile gradually disappeared. I was in the dungeon, being chased by an unreasonable lunatic with a knife. I played hide-and-seek for an entire night. The mystic did not say anything. Thales continued softly. Because he stubbornly believed that I was a product of the conspiracy created by the Three Disasters Alliance, even though I was born 5 years after the Bloody Year. Asta's eyes moved. He spoke slowly, his tone was cold. He discovered your secret? My secret. Thales stared at Asta gloomily. Damned secret. Don't worry, he's dead, Thales said nonchalantly as he shook off the weathered and lonely figure in his mind. He died a long time ago. The teenager's tone changed. But before that, he is not a possibility, but a definite threat to my life. The reason why I can still sit here and listen to you lecture me from above instead of becoming a prince. Thales lifted the hair on one side of his forehead, revealing a bald scar on his scalp. It's all because I lowered my head fast enough. Asta looked at him in silence. No one knew what he was thinking. So, this is indeed not a deal, and it's not a bargaining chip. Thales snorted coldly. He raised the invitation and waved it. It's proof that I was harmed by your glorious past, implicated by the sins you once committed, forced to a corner by an old grudge of which I know nothing, and almost lost my life. Thales' voice seemed to have alerted the occupants on the ceiling. The sound of rats scurrying around could be heard, but both of them ignored it. This unfortunate incident made me realize that mystic energy is not only about itself, but also about mystics. Asta did not speak, but the lines on his face grew sharper and more serious. Thales sucked in a deep breath. Compared to the so-called strange and unpredictable mystic energy with unknown consequences, perhaps the things you hid from me are a greater threat to me? Therefore, for the sake of my little life, I need to know. I must know. I demand to know. Thales raised the invitation high and, with an elegant movement, sent it flying to the other end of the room. Now, who is Froland? As soon as he finished speaking, the study fell silent. The two of them faced each other in silence. The Duke stood in front of the window, letting the moonlight cover his shoulders, leaving only a shadow on his face. The mystic stood in the room. The candlelight was bright, but it could not overshadow the blue in his eyes. Only the sporadic noises from the ceiling proved that the place was not dead silent. After a few minutes, Asta moved slightly and said, "You're really different." Thales snorted softly. "No matter how many times you repeat yourself, you're still the 20th. The Duke shook his head. "There's no prize." Ugh. The increasingly tense atmosphere was suffocating. The noises from the ceiling also became more uneasy. "If I refuse?" the mystic said faintly. His voice was still elegant and pleasant. Thales put on an I-knew-it expression and shrugged helplessly. "Then, I have no other choice. After all, you're the powerful mystic. I can't force you." The next second, the Duke of Star Lake stopped smiling. His eyes focused. But for the sake of my life, to not be harmed by your old debts, I can only try to save myself. I use all sorts of methods and channels to spy on that part of history. Asda did not say a word. The only response to the Duke was the increasingly anxious noises from the ceiling. Thales curled his lips. And did you know that there's an ancient book vault in Sunset Temple in the capital? The royal guards in Renaissance Palace left all sorts of records? Of course, don't forget the secrets of the kingdom. Before Thales could finish speaking, the air mystic's eyes moved. Blue light shone brightly. Ah! Damn it! The glaring light forced Thales to turn his head to avoid it. He cursed and raised his hand to block it. Fortunately, the glare from Asda's eyes only lasted for a moment before it immediately weakened. Thales raised his head in a flustered manner. He blinked continuously, waiting for the afterimage to disappear from his sight. What are you doing? The moment Thales said those words, he froze. Asda just stood there elegantly and calmly as usual, staring at him quietly. But Thales realized something and slowly raised his head. Silence. No, it's dead silence. At some point in time, there was no more noise in the study, only a terrifying silence. Thales stared at the ceiling in a daze. Cleared. Asda's eyes slowly returned to normal. His tone was ethereal. Including those in the nest and those who passed by, there were a total of 14 rats. No need to thank me. Decleared. Thales took a few seconds to understand this sentence. He could not help but gulp. Damn it. How am I going to explain this to everyone? A new stray cat in Star Lake Castle? The one that catches rats? If you want to be more thorough, then the rat nests around the castle and in the fields I can. The considerate Asda continued. Wow, thanks. Thales quickly stopped him. You don't have to be so thorough. I have to let my subordinates have something to do. Asda nodded cheerfully. Please forgive me. I was distracted by this matter. And what were you talking about just now? Thales clapped his hands. Oh, that just now. Anyway, what I meant was, Honorable Sir Sakern. The Duke, who had a high status and power, was all smiles. His attitude was amiable. We are teacher and student, guide and apprentice. We are companions on the long journey of mystic energy. Hence, there is a need for us to strengthen our communication and trust each other. Thales looked at his guide, whom he respected and admired from the bottom of his heart. His eyes were filled with anticipation. What do you think? The room fell into dead silence again. A few minutes later, the mystic spoke softly. Your Highness, are you saying that you wanted to use yourself to threaten me just now in exchange for my compromise? Thales coughed and his smile faded. I'm sorry. I only realized it recently. Thales exhaled and tried his best to be as sincere as possible. Using yourself as a bargaining chip is quite effective. Thales weighed the covenant in his pocket and thought sarcastically. After all, everyone loved Thales. Asda's gaze shifted and he stared at Thales. But a few seconds later, he suddenly laughed. You should really look in the mirror and look at yourself right now. The mystic smile, which felt like a puppet whose mouth had been carved into an arc, made Thales panic. The mirror in the bedroom is broken. I don't know when I'll replace it. Thales forced a smile to match the mystic's smile. It depended on Scholar Julio's account book. Wait, apart from killing rats, don't tell me that you also know how to repair mirrors? In the next second, before Thales' smile faded, Asda's eyes flashed with blue light again. Thales felt a great force surge towards him. Caught off guard, he was lifted into the air and fell heavily. Damn it! Looking at the rapidly approaching ground, Thales raised his hands to protect his head and face in exasperation. I knew this grandson was petty. Asterisk thud. Asterisk there was a muffled sound. Thales opened his eyes and snapped out of his daze. He landed on his feet and hung in the air with his face up. He was sitting in the air in a pathetic manner. Asda had already sat beside him and was leisurely admiring the night outside the window. Then let's talk, the mystic said calmly. As usual, no notes. Talk. Thales came back to his senses. He frowned and touched the air chair under his butt. He calmed his pounding heart and stared in disbelief at Asda, who had suddenly become easy to talk to. All right, looks like he's not that. Petty? Very well. Thinking of this, the teenager's lips twitched. But before you invite me to sit, perhaps you should first ask. Asterisk thud. Asterisk Thales fell heavily on the ground. He touched his buttocks and grimaced in pain. Oh, pain, pain, pain. F asterisk CK. Then may I ask, Your Highness, would you like to sit? Asta looked at him calmly. A blue light appeared on his left and outlined the outline of a chair. Your Highness, would you like to sit? Thales covered his butt and gritted his teeth as he climbed up. Sit your ass. But just as the word no reached his lips, he caught a glimpse of the mottled and faded old, crooked chair that belonged to the Duke behind the study table from the corner of his eye. The noble and dignified Duke of Star Lake could only smack his lips in annoyance. Sulking, he sat on the chair that Asda had prepared for him. Damn it. Petty. Frilin Sanchez. In the room, Asda stared at the small patch of night sky that was locked by the window. His gaze was unfocused. This is her name, at least the part that I know. Frilin Sanchez. Thales muttered the name in his heart. She was born very early. It is said that she witnessed the Empire during its heyday. I guess even among fellow mystics, there are very few who can surpass her in terms of experience. Asda's tone became tense. Before becoming a mystic, she was a magic apprentice at the Alchemy Tower. After becoming a mystic, her line of origin was named Senses. Alchemy Tower, I know. Thales raised his hand excitedly. Towards omniscience, right? But Asda did not give him a positive answer. What did you say? Alchemy Tower, their motto, Thales recalled and repeated. Towards omniscience. It's under the symbol of the strange eye. Asda narrowed his eyes and looked at him strangely. Seeing this, Thales had no choice but to stretch out his hand and draw a sentence in the ancient language of the Empire in the air. Towards omniscience? The mystic was silent for a long time. They taught you the language of the Empire, right? Of course, why? So you failed? Thales' small face darkened. Why don't you try taking lessons 8 days a week? What? You're asking where the extra days came from? Of course it's squeezed out from sleeping time. Thales was puzzled. What's wrong? Or is it better to translate omniscience into omnipotence? The languages in this world do not correspond to each other, Asda said coldly. If that's the case, why don't we just learn nouns one by one, and when it's time to use them we only need to say, you learn grammar class, idiot? Thales shrank back into his chair and crossed his arms in a daze. You actually, really don't have to be so mean. And if you can be a little more generous and magnanimous, noble, studious, knowledgeable, and progressive, Your Highness, Asda said faintly. Release a little of your touching feelings of being diligent in government affairs, worrying about the country, and caring about the welfare of the people. Squeeze out a little of the time you stand in front of the window and sigh at the majesty of the kingdom's vast rivers and mountains, or a little of your heroic courage to bargain with me in the face of death, and then generously and mercifully give them to some boring grammar lessons that you think are insignificant. Then, you may be lucky, coincidentally, unexpectedly, touching, and miraculously notice an insignificant point in an inconspicuous corner. In the language of the ancient empire, your so-called path is a concise combination of a noun and a verb. Thales felt dizzy as he listened. It took him a lot of effort to digest this long paragraph. Only then did the corners of his mouth twitch. You only need to say the last sentence. That's enough. Asda ignored him. So the Alchemy Tower's motto in the language of the ancient empire was not literally, path to omniscience. For the sake of his academic dignity, Thales had to pull himself together and began to draw in the air again. Then, path is a noun, so it is not path, but path, or even simpler, road. And the verb, road leads to omniscience? Thales looked at his guide expectantly. Asda did not even look at him. He said indifferently, look at the verb for omniscience. Thales scratched his head and continued to draw. All right, let me see. Oh. Thales came to a realization. So path to omniscience is a modification of road. Path to omniscience? Asda snorted coldly. Look at the verb for road. Thales frowned. Look again? But there are only a few of them. Oh. The teenager's expression changed again. I get it, road is a passive object. It has a corresponding subject predicate. But Thales was immediately confused. But this sentence does not have a subject-predicate. Asda snorted again. This time, Thales did not need to be reminded. He had an idea. I remember now. In the poems and proverbs of the ancient empire, according to the context and logic, certain elements would be omitted, such as I and I am. Thales slapped his thigh and said excitedly, "So the alchemy tower said, I am on the road, and the road leads to omniscience?" Asda was expressionless. "Do you usually speak like this?" Thales coughed and adjusted his words. "I am on the road to omniscience. Not simply heading to omniscience, right?" This time, Asda did not say anything. "Towards omniscience. I am on the road to omniscience." Thales silently recited these two sentences. He remembered the symbol of the strange eye on the alchemy tower and felt something in his heart. They are different. "A very big difference," Asda suddenly said. Thales thought for a moment and nodded. "I get it. Towards omniscience, it is like the door plate on a door. You just have to open it. Behind the door is omniscience." Asda did not comment. "But, I am on the road to omniscience. This is more like a signpost on a long road." Thales' eyes brightened. "You walk past it, you know you are not there yet, but you know the direction is right, and then you continue forward." The former was a complacent master who guarded the door. The latter was a traveler who carried a heavy burden and had a long journey. They are different. Thales was a little lost in thought. Musclemen may be rigid and stubborn, Asda looked at the moonlight outside the window and said faintly, "but they are also wizards." Thales came back to his senses. Musclemen. The mystic tilted his head. Soul Tower uses a derogatory term to mock them. "I understand. What do they call you?" "Thinkers." "Thinkers?" Thales raised his eyebrows. "Why not bookworms?" "Because it is ironic." Thales narrowed his eyes. Asda snorted coldly. "We use the most direct and simplest derogatory term that they will not misunderstand no matter what. And what they use to insult us is an ironic term that can only be understood by connecting the context, history, and reality." Thales was in high spirits. "Interesting. Even though they use derogatory terms against each other, the logic used by Soul Tower and Alchemy Tower is completely different. Am I right, thinkers?" Once he finished speaking, Asda looked at him expressionlessly. The air around him became heavy. Thales reacted and had to cough vigorously. Ahem, back to the topic at hand. The Duke's expression became stern. "So, Mr. Sakern, Fruland, she is an extremely experienced mystic, sensory mystic?" Don't what?" The mystic's tone instantly became cold. "Don't call her that. You can either call her by her mortal name, or use her full name, sensory mystic. You can even inadvertently mention sensory mystic in a sentence." The blue light in Asda's eyes was extremely sharp. "But the only thing you should not do is call a mystic by her name of origin in such a pure, simple, and crude way when you know who you are calling." "Don't call her by her name of origin?" Thales was puzzled. "Why?" The air mystic was silent for a while, as if he was thinking about something. But he still spoke in the end. "Because we do not know Fruland's current situation. Whether she is sealed, whether she is complete, how she is, whether she still walks freely, and whether she exists in the world, we do not know. If you call a mystic's name of origin wholeheartedly when you know who you are referring to, and if the other party is normal, you will sense it." Thales' expression froze. "If I call her name of origin seriously, alone, and intentionally, the other party will sense it. That means, once or twice might not be a big deal, but if it happens too many times. Trust me, no matter how soft it is, no one wants to be knocked on the window for no reason." Asda ended his sentence with a warning tone. Thales had a brainwave. "It's that amazing? Then let me try yours, air." At that moment, the air around him was compressed with the force of an avalanche. "No, no, no." Thales had difficulty breathing. His face flushed and he waved his hands randomly. "Ha ha ha!" In the next second, Asda put down his finger. Thales only then regained his breathing and panted in pain. F***CK. He's definitely doing it on purpose. First of all, this is not a friendly move. Asda snorted coldly. Secondly, remember, the magic empresses stand at the pinnacle of the path of mystic energy. I strongly suspect that they can use some unimaginable method to sense and monitor known names of origin. Once a mystic reacts due to being called too much, the B** cheese will notice that something is wrong. Magic Empress. Monitoring names of origin? Thales tugged at his collar and said unhappily, "So strange?" The mystic did not answer. He only stared at him coldly. Thales could only continue asking. "So, a name of origin is like a website, an address? Once you call it, it's like throwing a stone at someone's window? And the two empresses live in the tallest villa. They're hunters with sniper rifles and crossbows who stand at the highest point. If someone's window rings, they pull the trigger and kill them in one shot?" Hearing this, Asda heaved a long, deep sigh. He seemed dissatisfied. Metaphors, analogies, and analogies are always like this. But he only paused for a few seconds before his eyes glowed with blue light. "No. In a sense, a name of origin is more like a gate with a sign hanging on it. It's used to distinguish our territory and boundaries, and to warn others." The air mystic's eyes were bright and piercing. He stared at an unknown place. "To prevent us from clashing, fighting, and killing each other. Distinguishing territory and boundaries. Gate." Thales furrowed his brows and asked further. "But, if the other party can sense it by directly calling a name of origin, then it's like a gate deliberately erected to attract people to knock on it?" Asda turned his head. "Isn't this the reason why a gate is stronger than a wall?" The mystic's voice sounded as if it was thousands of miles away, indistinct and indistinct. "It also leaves space for others to visit." Thales blinked in pain. "It's a little complicated?" "You'll understand." The blue light in Asda's eyes slowly disappeared. "When you understand." Thales nodded and forced a fake smile. "Thank you for your nonsense." However, he suddenly realized that after he displayed his mystic ability and resolutely expressed his opinion that, "I don't want to be implicated by your old debts," this time, Asda seemed to be willing to teach him more, deeper, and more difficult to understand. In the study room illuminated by candlelight, two people, one big and one small, were suspended side by side in the air. One was quietly contemplating, and the other was gritting his teeth with his arms crossed. It was an extremely strange sight. Thales thought of something and immediately asked, "Then, is the world cleansing project 700 years ago, which aimed to destroy the records and history of magic related to this?" The mystic turned his head. "When there are fewer and fewer people who remember you, there are fewer and fewer people who call out to you." The teenager slowly sorted out the logic and gradually felt that it made sense. "Then, when your names of origin are heard, it will be extremely conspicuous. It will make it easier for the two empresses to hunt you down?" Asda was silent for a while. "Perhaps," the mystic said faintly. "But it's not just that." Thales was about to ask, but Asda had already spoken. "Whether it's when demons bewitch people, asking the victims to call out their taboo names loudly, or when religions spread their beliefs, asking the believers to repeat the admonition of the gods, or when the emperor rules over the world, asking millions of people to shout, 'Long live the empire,' over and over again." The mystic seemed to be immersed in his own world again. Summoning symbols is always the most direct way to strengthen connections, establish habits, and build authority. Mystic abilities are the same, and even more so. Thales was puzzled by what he heard. "I actually, don't quite understand." Asda raised his head and was extremely certain. "You will understand. Sooner or later." Thales could only hug his arms tightly and chuckle. "Thank you." "Another nonsense. And this is why, Mr. Sakern, you have been unwilling to tell me the names of the two empresses and the unsealed mystics?" "This is one of the reasons," Asda said solemnly. "And you have to be careful, especially since you have already started to come into contact with mystic abilities and even knocked on the door. A mortal calling out their names of origin and a mystic calling out their names of origin are on a completely different level." Thales snorted softly, turned around on the air chair, and turned to his guide. You could have told me earlier. You could have just told me what I could do and what I couldn't, and that would have been it." The prince pursed his lips. "This has nothing to do with mystic abilities." The mystic was silent for a while. "Trust me, Thales." Asda spoke faintly, but it made Thales a little nervous. "Everything that happens in this world, everything, is all related to mystic abilities." "Strange. He's been talking so much today." Thales frowned, but still decided to turn around again and look at the ceiling. No, when he thought of the 14 rat corpses on the ceiling, Thales had to flip to the other side and face the door. So, even mystics themselves usually don't call each other by their names of origin? 1. Thales frowned. What? The mystic's ethereal voice rang again. This time, his tone was mechanical and indifferent. As far as I know, since the birth of mystic abilities, there has only been one and only mystic. From the beginning to the end, he did not have any scruples. He was used to calling his peers by their names of origin, and he even believed in it. As if that was our only name. As if that was his creed in this world. For some reason, when he heard this sentence, Thales shuddered. He subconsciously turned around and looked at Asda. And every time he called out my name of origin, the air mystic was lying in the air. His blue eyes flickered as he stared at the ceiling. But it did not seem like he was staring at the ceiling. Instead, it was something above and beyond it. Thales had rarely seen Asda like this. Who is he? The teenager could not help but ask. Asda did not move. But in the next moment, there was a flash of blue light. The air mystic's gaze, which was filled with blue light, locked onto Thales. This gave Thales a shock. It was like a comic strip flipping on a book. In the blink of an eye, it changed to the next page. Fortunately, he and his brother have been confirmed to be sealed. The blue light in the mystic's eyes flowed out of his eye sockets and climbed up his face like cracks. Before they destroyed the world. The two rays of blue light made Thales extremely uncomfortable. He subconsciously turned his head to avoid them. In the next moment, the air mystic instantly turned towards the sky and called out a word coldly and numbly. Exist. 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 This word seemed to have some kind of power. Under Asda's call, it seemed to echo faintly. In the next moment, Thales felt as if he was hallucinating. All the sounds and colors in the world disappeared at the same time. Even his thoughts had come to a halt. Everything was over. After an unknown amount of time, he felt a movement somewhere. Soon, the ceiling, the ground, the walls, the door. Everything in front of him and beside his ears gradually returned to him. In the next second, the teenager took a deep breath and sat up. Thales came back to his senses and realized that he was drenched in cold sweat. Asda sat beside him. Just like before, he looked at him calmly, elegantly, and indifferently. Thales panted rapidly and blinked his eyes frantically. Everything is normal. Normal? The only extra thing, or rather, what was left behind. It's an omnipresent feeling from the inside out. Deep palpitation. Chapter 638. Looks like you felt the weight of that name of origin. Asda stared at Thales, who was panting heavily. He seemed to be deep in thought. Especially when the person who summoned it is a mystic, and he's close at hand. Thales wiped away the sweat on his forehead and gritted his teeth. What was that feeling just now? Asda snorted softly and regained his usual elegance. Don't worry. He's sealed and can't respond with dignity. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sitting here safely. Thales exhaled and stared outside the window. The moonlight was blocked by dark clouds. It was dark outside the castle. Only the sporadic cries of birds and beasts could be heard in the distance. The atmosphere became a little cold. The teenager's mood was also dragged down. What was that feeling? There was an ethereal quality in Thales' voice that he could not feel. When you, as a mystic, were sealed by the legendary anti-mystic equipment? Asda fell silent. But there was a faint blue light in his eyes, like the stars in the night sky. It's best that I don't tell you. Thales furrowed his brows. Why? Asda paused for a few seconds before he spoke. 7 years ago, when I was sealed by that short sword, what did you see? Thales was stunned. He could not help but recall his unpleasant first meeting with the air mystic. When he was sealed by Yodel. What did I see? Thales tried hard to recall. His tone was uncertain. You turned into many rays of light of indistinguishable color and scattered. Energy, loud noise, impact, explosion. Then I don't remember. What about Giza? Giza. Thales tensed up. He remembered the blood mystic's last moments. Be careful of Asda. She withered, hardened, turned black, became brittle, then cracked, shattered, and turned into ashes that filled the sky. Thales recounted the past. He remembered the moment he used the blade of purification to seal Giza. For some reason, there was an indescribable sorrow in his heart. Like the embers of a burning fire, they scattered with the wind. The mystic nodded. He looked at the darkness outside the window. This is what you saw, but it already explains a lot. Asda's tone suddenly became tense. 700 years ago, as the first target of the mystics, Ban was sealed in a very straightforward and swift manner. He disappeared without a trace, and even if we knocked on the door, entered our original forms, and used the crudest method to call out his name of origin, we did not get any response or feedback. It was as if he had fallen asleep and would never wake up again. There were many witnesses when Eric was besieged. His indignant roar in his original form startled almost all the mystics, so much so that we always had the illusion that he still existed, but there was only dead silence left. He was ignorant, unconscious, thoughtless, and emotionless. As time passed, we gradually realized that he was not coming back. We don't know how many times Solovsky was hunted, but after he knocked on the door abruptly and awkwardly, his state was permanently abnormal. His response to us was incoherent, confusing, and contradictory. The only thing he conveyed was coldness, desperation, and stillness. In the end, it became countless meaningless fragments. Ben, Eric, Solovsky. When these familiar names appeared from Asda's mouth, Thales' expression changed slightly. Lebla was hunted by 3 legendary anti-mystic equipment. Each time, he was restricted and weakened a little. In the end, he fell to the 4th one. But after he was sealed, he did not disappear immediately. Instead, he lingered in our senses for 3 months before gradually weakening, becoming silent, and returning to stillness. Thanks to him, we knew that the seal was not death and destruction, but another incomprehensible state. We also knew that Helen and Bloodspike were already existences of another level, the supreme empress of all magic. L's seal was the strangest and most mysterious. As the scariest mystic aside from B, even though we don't have any news about him, we all know and feel that he still exists in the world. But at a certain moment, you turned around and realized in shock that he had disappeared a long, long time ago. You just inexplicably forgot about him. And Kirai, a mystic as valiant and iron-blooded as he was, who was so proud and sharp that he dared to fight against 2 mystic brothers at the same time, the last time he knocked on the door, he conveyed a bottomless pain, anger, disgust, and even despair. As for Giza, in 700 years, she encountered no less than 2 calamity hunters and no less than 6 legendary anti-mystic equipment one after another. She fought back and forth. Although it was inevitable that she would end up in a pathetic state, most of her life was spared, until you placed the last straw on her, and she turned into innumerable dead things and ashes. When he said this, Asda's tone changed. And finally B. Thales' expression tensed. When he was sealed, even though he was thousands of miles away, Asda's voice was ethereal. The shock and waves that tore everything apart and destroyed everything made me think that the world was about to end. Hence, every mystic's performance and effects are different when they are sealed, and we suspect that this is because every mystic energy? Thales took over the conversation. The teenager's expression was solemn. So you can't tell me because of the mystic energy first covenant. Asda pondered for a while and nodded. Every mystic's mystic energy is unique. This might decide how they are sealed, as well as the state and feeling of being sealed. Thales was silent for a long time. His expression was solemn. Then, as someone with experience, do you have any suggestions? The teenager looked at the guide. When we face legendary anti-mystic equipment. The air mystic was also silent for a long time. No. Every legendary anti-mystic equipment can weaken mystic energy, or even render it completely ineffective. We can't even get close to it, let alone touch it. Even if the same equipment is in different times, in different hands, and when faced with different enemies, it might have completely different effects and functions. You might not even be able to prepare for it in advance. This answer caused the atmosphere to become heavy. Thales furrowed his brows. Then, why do I still want to become a mystic? At the very least, I can still touch them now, but after I take that step, I will have a fatal weakness, and any legendary anti-mystic equipment can kill me? If you don't take that step, you'll be full of fatal weaknesses. Asda shook his head with slight disdain. Even if you don't use the legendary anti-mystic equipment, any weapon, even a small nail, can kill you. Thales choked. All right, let's get back to the topic at hand. The Duke waved his hand. So you're wondering. Fruland's current situation is unknown? Which camp does she belong to? How did you guys end up together? Fruland. This name made the blue light in Asda's eyes flash. It branched out and seeped into his face. But he did not answer. Instead, he looked at Thales coldly. Tonight, I have already told you a lot of things. And what is your reward? Reward. Thales paused for a moment before he realized what the man was talking about. But you just said that this is not a deal. That's right. Asda tidied up his clothes, which were actually not messed up at all, in a calm and composed manner. So, I call this teacher and student helping each other and learning from each other. Thales immediately choked. A few seconds later, the teenager gave him the middle finger gloomily. F*CKU. What does this mean? The middle finger? The Northlanders' new trend of swearing on the street. Then, Asda's expression was indifferent. I can only tell you about Fruland next time. All right. Thales had no choice but to raise his hands in surrender. He stood up in annoyance and pointed at the blue invitation card on the ground. Then, don't blink. The next second, the invitation card reappeared in Thales' hands. The teenager narrowed his eyes, sneered, and waved the invitation card at the mystic. But Asda did not have time to pay attention to Thales' expression. So beautiful. The guide stared at Thales' fingers. His words were profound. Charming, beautiful, and indescribable. Hearing the string of adjectives, Thales felt a little embarrassed. He coughed. All right, this ability, how should I put it, is a little awkward. Asda's attention returned to Thales' words. Awkward? Thales sighed and stuffed the invitation card into his pocket. Let me put it this way. If I were a charlatan who could perform magic tricks, my performances would definitely be full of people, and there would be loud cheers. If I were a thief who lived on the streets, my business would also be easy, and I would never leave empty-handed. Even if I were a mercenary who lived on the edge of a knife, I would still be able to catch my opponent by surprise during a battle, and it would still be very effective. The teenager's tone sank. But you are a prince, Asda calmly finished his sentence. The Honorable Duke of Star Lake. Thales' smile disappeared in an instant. Exactly. The teenager was a little dejected. If I wanted to watch a magic show, I could hire the best circus in the entire Western Peninsula. They could perform better than me without mystic energy. If I wanted to get something from afar, why don't I ask the guards and servants to get it directly instead of using mystic energy? It would save me a lot of effort. Thales mocked. And if I really ran into an enemy, instead of using all my strength to use mystic energy, I might as well just wave my hand, and there would be big men who would rush forward like wolves and beat them up for me. Asda listened to him in silence and did not express his opinion. Also, for an outstanding street beggar, if you want to steal something from someone's pocket without anyone noticing, you really don't need any mystic energy. Thales snapped his fingers, and the invitation card from his pocket magically appeared in his other hand. You really don't need any mystic energy. So for now, its greatest use is to steal 2 forbidden tomes when I visit Sunset Temple to ask for advice and pray. Thales sighed and ended his lamentation. Fortunately, you are a prince. Asda looked at him quietly. Your identity is set in stone. You can't go out and embarrass yourself with these petty tricks and bring trouble upon yourself. Thales raised his eyebrows. Very good. Asda nodded. Keep it. Keep a low profile and maintain this habit, the mystic said coldly. Don't use it easily, and don't expose it on your own. Sometimes, you'd rather go through more trouble and take a few extra steps to get a cup than let others find out about it. Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble sooner or later. Thinking of Watchman Zakriel in the dungeon, Thales said gloomily, Thank you for the reminder. I understand. At this moment, a blue light flashed in Asda's eyes. You're bleeding. Thales was shocked and reached out to wipe his wound. T. Oh, the weather has been hot recently. Thales rubbed his nose in a natural manner and chuckled. He put his left hand, which was covered in blood, behind his back and raised the invitation card with his right hand again. So, do you still want it? He skillfully took out a handkerchief and sat back on the chair, revealing an evil and bewitching smile. Do you want more? Asda stared at him with interest, which made Thales a little uneasy. A few seconds later, the mystic snorted softly and returned to the topic that Thales was most concerned about. Furlan did not participate in the Battle of Eradication, so she was classified as a moderate by the extremists. But this classification is not convincing, because Furlan is estranged from most of her peers. When he said this, the air mystic suddenly changed the topic. However, even an omnipotent being like B respects her, or should I say, is wary of her. A mystic that even B is wary of. Thales pressed the handkerchief against his nose while he silently memorized these words in his heart. Is she very powerful? Asda shook his head. Powerful cannot be considered an appropriate description. This word is too general and pale, and its meaning is limited. Then, let's put it another way. Is she very special? Every mystic is special. The mystic's eyes shone with a strange light. But according to a senior, Furlan saw things that were even more amazing. Sensory mystic is even more amazing. Thales could not help but recall what he saw in the prison of Bones and Zakriel's trembling statement. In fact, she has lived longer than all of us royal guards put together. Asda continued to speak. In the Battle of Eradication, the two empresses rose to power, the extremists suffered a crushing defeat, and the remaining mystics were hunted down one by the disaster hunters. Thales' gaze shifted. Disaster hunters? The first batch of masters of the legendary anti-mystic equipment, Asda explained softly, and there was a hint of displeasure in his tone. Unlike now, when the warriors who were granted the equipment were focused and pure, and they only had one goal. But in comparison, Furlan received special treatment. What special treatment? Asda paused for a second. His eyes showed caution and wariness. The two magic empresses, Helen and Bloodspike, personally went to hunt Furlan. What? Thales was shocked and put down the handkerchief. The two empresses personally went to hunt. The sensory mystic? So, Furlan survived the two empresses' attack? Asda nodded. His gaze was profound. In the 700 years after that, I went into hiding. I once thought that Furlan was doomed. The mystic raised his eyes and looked straight at Thales. Until she took the initiative to contact us. Or rather, she tried to contact a lot of people, but the only ones who really responded to her were me and Giza. Thales' eyelids twitched. Contact you? For what? Asda snorted softly. She had a plan to rebel against the two empresses. Rebel? Against the two empresses of magic. Thales gulped. What plan? Asda stared into the distance. His gaze was sharp. Furlan believes that the oldest royal family in the world, even if most of them are greedy, short-sighted mortals, and as stupid as pigs, hides an important secret. An important secret. Thales thought of the greatest king, mentioned by the mercenary Ricky in the prison of Bones. He still clenched his fists. Thank you for your evaluation of our family. Thales' expression was solemn. What secret? Asda smiled. Do you really want to know? Thales became alert. Wait, you're not thinking of ending class, are you? The mystic smiled softly. Furlan did not say. I don't know either. Thales was stunned for a moment before he reacted. What? Aren't you working together? Asda shook his head. That's just Furlan's plan. Giza and I have our own plans. The three of us are working together, but we each get what we need. Thales was silent for a while. He felt a little helpless. So, the three of you in your small group do not communicate with each other, and each have ulterior motives? What a model of teamwork. But Asda was not bothered. This is the norm for mystics to get along, and you should be glad about it. Why? Because the last time, there were more than two mystics working together. Asda glanced at him. There was a hint of warning in his teasing tone. It was the Battle of Eradication. Thales pursed his lips and raised his hand. Pretend I didn't say anything. But Furlan said that once she unravels that secret, the magic empresses will not be a threat anymore. Asda's eyes shone with blue light. Unravel that secret. The two empresses will not be a threat anymore. Thales thought of something, and his breathing froze. A legendary anti-mystic equipment without any trace of the two empresses, without any restrictions or taboos. A secret weapon that can completely seal the blood spike in Helen. Thales tried hard to shake off Ricky's words and the appearance of the small red sword. He asked tentatively, "So, for Fruland's secret, you attacked my grandfather, and in the end brought about the bloody year?" Asta snorted coldly. "First of all, we did not bring about that disaster. Secondly, I said that we each get what we need. And Fruland is fully responsible for all the matters of the palace, including the king. Giza and I have no right and no intention to interfere." Thales narrowed his eyes. "No intention to interfere. This doesn't sound like your style, does it?" The mystic shook his head. "Eternal Star City is not a fun place. As the political center of the Western Peninsula, more than one legendary anti-mystic equipment is stored here. Not only can mystic energy not work around it." When he said this, Asda paused for a moment. "You've also seen what happened the last time I entered Eternal Star City." Thales pursed his lips. "Don't worry, Yodel is not here." Asda glanced at him. "I know. I probed, or else I would not have shown up." Thales glanced at him with complicated feelings. Then, since Renaissance Palace is so dangerous, and there is a legendary anti-mystic equipment, how did Fruland succeed? The air mystic was silent for a while, as if he was reminiscing about the past. "A mortal's method," Asda said faintly. "She lurked in the secular world. For several generations, she carefully and persistently observed, waited, and probed to find a way to infiltrate Constellation's court. And it was not easy." Thales nodded and was immediately shocked. "Several generations. Wait, how long ago was this?" Asda was silent for a while before he slowly said, "When Fruland came to us, John the Red King had just ousted his own sister from the throne." John the Red King. John II and his sister, Queen Erica the Conqueror of the North. Thales' expression changed. "That was 200 years ago?" The mystic snorted coldly. "As I've said, to us, there's no such thing as a long wait. 200 years of planning." After the shock, Thales sighed. "So she succeeded in the end, patient Fruland, or should I say, Queen Fiosa." When he said this, Thales could not help but remember the watchman's words. His Majesty has been bewitched, coerced, and controlled by the most evil existence in the world. She could not defeat the legendary anti-mystic equipment, Thales said absent-mindedly. But she defeated those who had the right to control them. The study room was quiet for a while. Fruland's name of origin is senses. Asda seemed to be sentimental. When it comes to bewitching people and deceiving them, no one in the same profession can surpass her. Thales did not speak. Zakriel's words were still lingering in his mind. As early as 1,000 years ago, before the empire collapsed, she was already famous for manipulating people's minds and creating illusions. Fruland infiltrated the court. "What about you?" Thales snapped out of his memories and asked, "What did you and Giza do?" Asda's misty gaze moved, and the blue light gathered again. He was silent for a few seconds before he said, "Fruland knew that she was not here to lurk, but to take action." Whether it was the legendary anti-mystic equipment in the court, the calamity stories passed down from generation to generation in the great families, the kingdom's secret intelligence department, or the Jade Star royal family's top-secret methods, as the plan progressed and the goal became clearer, the closer she got to the secret of mystic energy, the more flaws she revealed, and the more suspicion she aroused. This was inevitable. Yes, Thales agreed wholeheartedly. For example, a certain former watchman in the Prison of Bones who liked to hack the prince with a knife. To make matters worse, after the Battle of Eradication, the history of mystics disappeared from the world because of Project World Cleansing. This left us with nowhere to hide. In the secular world, which was like a pool of stagnant water, any unusual movement would be extremely conspicuous. Based on experience, once a rumor such as the appearance of a suspected mystic spreads in a certain place, Helen and Bloodspike's minions, or even themselves, will follow the rumor and come over to kill it. Asda's gaze became fierce. For this, she needs cover and divert attention. And we cannot only rely on the channels in the palace. Thales pondered for a moment before he said, "Blood Bottle Gang?" The mystic nodded. It was originally a smuggling gang formed by a few desperate winemakers at the border of the kingdom. But as the Blood Bottle Gang expanded, The rumor that there were two mystics behind it began to spread on the streets. In addition, Giza showed up a few times to cause trouble. This was enough to arouse the vigilance of the higher-ups of the kingdom and the church. It even attracted the attention of the magic empress who was lurking behind the scenes, Asda said flatly. Thales thought for a moment and came to a realization. You used yourselves as bait to divert attention? He said in surprise. This is a very big risk. Asda glanced at him. If the Blood Bottle Gang wanted to plot a rebellion or a coup, or even reveal the truth about the calamity and start the second battle of eradication, yes. The mystic changed the topic. But what if the biggest goal of this so-called mystic gang is just to control the smuggled alcohol in the underground black market? Those with ulterior motives would suspect, probe, and investigate, but they would only find that this gang, which originated from the streets and was formed by peddlers and servants, had the biggest goal of dominating the market, seizing territory, smuggling contraband goods, and fighting for fame and profit. And the story of the so-called mystics behind the scenes, which they used to threaten and bewitch the outside world, was even more absurd. It was full of mistakes and had nothing to do with the calamity of the world's destruction. Perhaps it was learned from an ancient book by a fellow who smuggled alcohol? Asda said coldly. Hence, for more than 100 years, through generations of agents, we continued to repeat the boring small-scale fights between gangs, which were akin to playing house. At the same time, we spread the false and inaccurate rumors of mystics to the lower classes, until it became a legend in the streets and alleys. Hearing this, Thales understood a little. He sighed. Then you succeeded. When I was young, I heard from Rick, a child beggar leader, that when he was rich, he would hire 2 mystics to guard his door and be his bodyguards. There was a rare teasing tone in Asda's words. Then, he had to be very rich. In the next second, the mystic's tone became cold. Just like that, although we could not reveal the truth about the calamity, we foiled the world cleansing plan and awakened the people's fear and opposition towards the 2 empresses. But starting from the borders of the kingdom, in the quagmire of the lower classes far away from the nobles, we spread a layer of fog throughout the entire western peninsula. When mystics were mentioned time and time again in a teasing or exaggerated tone, they became commonplace, and it was difficult to distinguish the truth from the lies. Then, we hid in the sea of countless people at the bottom of the hierarchy, and successfully relaxed their vigilance and attention. This way, when Furlan truly infiltrated the upper class of the palace and even took control of the kingdom, questions like mystics plotting to steal the country would be drowned in the rumors of mystics ambitious to unify Red Street Market, blood calamity dominating Black Gold Casino, and apocalyptic calamity dominating the 3 major commercial streets. Thales understood the process and frowned. All right, I have to say, this idea is quite interesting. And he could even imagine the following scene. A spy came to report to the Magic Empress. According to reliable information, the terrible calamity who once tore the continent apart has returned and secretly formed an underground force, a private gang. The 2 empresses were murderous as they drew their weapons and prepared for battle. What are they doing? Answer: a gang fight on the street. The 2 empresses were speechless. The teenager wiped the blood from his nose. What kind of apocalyptic villain would do such a thing? Mystics walk the streets. Calamities are lesser than dogs. No one would believe it even if it was written in a novel. The power system would collapse. So, you used more than 100 years just to cover up? Asda snorted coldly. You should say, we only used more than 100 years to cover up. Thales sighed. So, did Furland and all of you get what they wanted? Asda shook his head. What happened? The mystic was silent for a while. His gaze was profound. I don't know. But I guess we were still discovered. Discovered. Thales' gaze shifted. In one night, Giza was ambushed by the legendary anti-mystic equipment in Steel City. She was at her last gasp and lost contact. Constellation, on the other hand, exceeded expectations. It escaped control. The royal family bled, and the crown fell to the ground. The royal family bled, and the crown fell to the ground. Of course, it was also the fairy bell that the Jade Star royal family used to travel to Hell's River during the Bloody Year. Thales thought of the guards and prisoners in the Prison of Bones, and he felt complicated for a moment. Furland was forced to leave Eternal Star City, and even the kingdom before all the legendary anti-mystic equipment turned to target her. Asda's gaze was sharp. And when I rushed to Renaissance Palace, I only saw corpses on the ground. Corpses on the ground. Both of them were silent for a while. That's it. The prince took a deep breath and recalled what he saw in Lower City District a few months ago. He asked cautiously, "Then why did Black Sword say that you once started a massacre at the palace gate?" "At the palace gate. Started a massacre." The mystic glanced at Thales and seemed to be deep in thought. That glance made the prince nervous for no reason. 18 years ago in this very city, the air mystic, that undying monster, stood in front of Renaissance Palace. Killed Constance Morris of the Brotherhood. His words were faintly discernible in Thales' ears. They saw me as an enemy and attacked me brazenly. Asda did not care. Naturally, I responded with straightforwardness and returned the favor. Thales sucked in a deep breath. Responded with straightforwardness. All right. Then, how did you expose yourselves? Thales suppressed the sensitive question and asked another question. What exactly did Fruland do? What happened to the Jade Star royal family? Why did they escape from your control? I'm not sure. Asda shook his head. He looked disinterested. I've said it before. Fruland was in charge of all matters in the palace. All we know is that the plan failed. The mystic looked out of the window gloomily. After toiling for 100 years, we have nothing. The two empresses are still here. More powerful than before. The two empresses. Thales mulled over these two words and felt a little depressed. But he quickly looked up again. You said that the Three Disasters Alliance has its own agenda. What about you and Giza? Why did you join them? The teenager sniffled and narrowed his eyes. It can't be to unify Red Street Market, can it? Asda chuckled. I don't know Giza's goal, but based on my understanding of her. The mystic paused for a moment. Blue light flowed in his eyes. What she wants is definitely much more than we, Fruland and I, can imagine. He said gloomily. Much more greedy, much more crazy, much more terrifying. Much more unbelievable. The study room fell into silence again. What about you? A few seconds later, Thales spoke again. He stared at his guide. Air Mystic, why did you cooperate with them and extend your hand to Constellation? I recently made a chart of the Jade Star royal family's lineage and posted it in the usual place. End of this chapter. Chapter 639. Thales stood in the middle of the study and pointed at the invitation on the floor with a lifeless expression. Are you ready? Wait. Asda stopped him. The mystic looked at him quietly and slowly raised a finger. This time try this. Thales was stunned. Try which? Before he could finish speaking, the sound of wind suddenly rose. The broken chair with a corner missing flew up from behind the study table and flew towards Thales. Thales immediately turned pale with fright. He subconsciously raised his hand. F***CK, what are you doing? *thud. The chair landed with a loud bang. In the next second, there was an urgent knocking on the door. Your Highness, Your Grace. What happened? Please answer me. We have to go in. Move aside. No, let's go together. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Bang. There was another loud noise. The two people on duty, second-class Vanguard official Leo Morgan and second-class protector Jose Custa, pushed open the door and rushed into the room. Then they stopped at the same time and widened their eyes. Your Highness? Thales was seen with his back facing the two guards. He was sprawled on the chair in a strange posture. Leo, Jose, wow, it's you guys tonight. Thales turned his head with difficulty and forced a smile. It's okay. It's just that when I was training, there was a stinky rat messing around. Morgan and Custa turned around to check. The entire study was empty. Other than 2 candlesticks being extinguished, everything was normal. But Your Highness, your nose. Protector Custa spoke with a thick accent from the Land of Thorns. He looked at Thales, who was sprawled on the chair with his butt up. Thales calmly took out a handkerchief and wiped the blood under his nose. It's okay, it's okay. You know, puberty. He waved his hand. Go out. Morgan nodded. He walked to the candlestick and lit the candle again. But Custa still wanted to say something. Go out. The Duke of Star Lake gritted his teeth. Morgan pulled Custa and bowed to Thales. If you need help, Your Highness, we are at the door. Thales watched them leave before he closed the door. The young man heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at Asda, who had appeared out of nowhere, and said in exasperation, "I thought you blocked the sound." "I did indeed seal it." The mystic seemed to be deep in thought. But the interference and repulsion between the mystic abilities of different thresholds and mystics cannot be ignored. It is second only to the effect of legendary anti-mystic equipment on mystic energy. Thales felt a little dizzy from this string of terms. Coupled with the disheveled state he was in, he patted the chair under him and said unhappily, "All right, then I'll leave it to you. Next time you want to do something like this, can you send me an invitation in advance?" Asda stared at the chair and said nothing. This chair could have been used for another week, but now... Thales released his grip angrily. The poor chair split neatly into two halves, and fell to either side. "Thank you so much." "All right, how am I supposed to tell everyone?" His Excellency the Duke fell down from the broken chair and had a nosebleed. In a fit of anger, he mercilessly slashed the chair, leaving the poor chair without a complete corpse. But the air mystic only paced slowly to Thales' side and gestured for him to be quiet. "Now, I want to ask you some questions. You have to focus and speak carefully," Asda said softly, but he was extremely serious. "Speak slowly, word by word. If I ask you to stop, you have to shut up immediately. Not a single word is allowed." But Thales' anger had not subsided. "What if I talk too much? What then?" Asda glanced at him. His gaze was cold and murderous. Thales choked. He sniffed and smelled the scent of blood. He was unhappy. "All right." Asda observed the symmetrically separated chair. "This ability, what is it?" "Who knows? I don't know what it is, and I don't know how I learned it. It looks like Ralph's psionic ability, or some street magician's trick," Thales said angrily. "But psionic abilities and tricks won't make me run for my life every day." "No." Asda stared at the chair in fascination, but shook his head to deny it. "Psionic abilities are the natural evolution of life, and tricks are deceptions with superficial appearances." "But this..." The chair floated in front of the mystic, accompanied by his ethereal and pleasant voice. "This is beyond our understanding. It's completely different." Thales wiped his nosebleed. He was uninterested. "Whatever. What can you affect?" "Small objects." Thales was listless. The smaller the target, the better. The lighter the better. The closer the better. The simpler the better. For example, paper, leaves, hair. And if the target is too big, heavy, far away, or even too complicated, I will have a nosebleed and become dizzy. If I use it frequently... Asda narrowed his eyes. "Will it hurt?" Thales recalled the dangerous escape he had in the prison of bones. "No, it's a little better than that." Thales twitched the corner of his mouth. He was expressionless. "It will die." Asda thought for a while and nodded slowly. "Interesting. Most of the time, it's like stretching out my hand to reach something that's far away." Thales picked up the half of the chair on the ground helplessly. He then walked up to the mystic without giving him any face. He grabbed the half that was floating in the air and pushed it to the corner. But there were a few times when I stretched out my hand, and it felt like I wasn't just reaching out. It was more like... At this point, Asda suddenly turned his head. "Stop." Thales was startled by the abrupt interruption. Asda closed his eyes. A few seconds later he spoke. "How long has it been? This thing?" Thales cursed the little dummy in his heart as he adjusted himself. "I've been practicing for about half a year. Every time, I'm tormented until my back hurts and I can't get out of bed. Now I've finally found a way." Asda suddenly opened his eyes. "Stop." Thales choked again. It was as if he had a fishbone stuck in his throat. It was extremely uncomfortable. F***ck, again? "Remember what I said. Be careful with your words," the mystic said carefully. "You said you found a way. What way?" Thales gulped. "Let me put it this way. Once, I got tired of practicing with a piece of paper and wanted to try changing it to a bridle. In the end, the thick and hard rope became... Stop." The mystic's warning rang out just in time. F***ck. Thales pursed his lips and changed the topic. "Anyway, I could only throw it into the sewers. Of course, under normal circumstances, it's not easy to lock onto a target. Asda acutely grasped the main point. Under normal circumstances? Thales shrugged. Yes. Obviously, when I knocked on the door, everything was very easy. It was as natural as breathing and drinking water. Asda raised his hand again. Stop. Thales sighed helplessly. Can't we talk properly? Asda fell silent and pondered on his own. I know. This feels weird, right? The prince, who was displeased because he was interrupted many times, sneered. You're very curious and want to understand and explore, but because of the mystic ability First Covenant, you have to desperately restrain your impulses and resist the temptation. You keep telling yourself that you can't go deeper, that you can't continue, that you have to stop. He looked at Asda, whose eyes were glowing blue, and revealed a sinister and cunning smile. Then, do you want to know more? Do you want more? Hee, I can give you everything. A blue light flashed in Asda's eyes. Oh, error. I was wrong, teacher. The blue light flashed again. The Duke of Star Lake, who was second only to him and above tens of thousands of people, regained the right to breathe freely. He lay on the desk and panted pitifully. So the First Covenant of mystic ability, Thales turned around with his last breath. What is the original purpose of its existence? Asda did not speak. He stared at the chair in the corner and said faintly, For ourselves. Nonsense again. Thales sighed. Having lost the chair, he could only turn around and sit on the desk. All right, I've given you what you wanted and answered your question. Can we get back to the main topic? Before I die from excessive blood loss? The teenager knocked on the desk and said impatiently, Now, among the three mystics, what do you want? The blue light in the mystic's eyes gradually extinguished. He turned around with his hands behind his back. His silhouette in the study seemed cold and ethereal. Do you really want to know? I told you, the more you hide from me, Thales shook the blood-stained handkerchief out of boredom, the more likely I will fall for something I don't know. Moreover, aren't we students and guides? We are so close and trust each other. We can be called model teachers and students. Asda suddenly spoke. Answer me. Who won the battle of eradication? The boring atmosphere in the classroom suddenly became serious and formal. Thales was caught off guard. He quickly put away the handkerchief. Who won? The world, mortals and all intelligent races. But Asda did not speak. The mystic continued to stare at him coldly. All right. Thales crossed his arms and thought for a while. The Magic Empress. The legendary anti-mystic equipment they created can seal mystics. He recalled what he saw in the lowest level of the prison of bones and could not help but frown. But it can't be used on them. As long as the Empress sets fire, the calamities are not allowed to light the lamp. Asda's eyes flashed. Looks like you've learned a lot on your own since we last met. Thales snorted softly. Don't forget, I have the crown in my left hand and mystic energy in my right. Thales spread his arms boldly, then awkwardly hid his bloodied left hand behind his back. The teenager continued, just like that, the two empresses chased the other mystics away like rats on the street and monopolized the right to use mystic energy. According to you, they even deepened their understanding of mystic energy. They are the biggest winners. Asda nodded. But in the next second, his tone became mysterious. Then, as the biggest winners, why did the two empresses of magic disappear for 700 years and hide behind the scenes? Only a few people revere them, and no one even knows where they are? Thales was momentarily stunned. Why did the two empresses of magic disappear? Well, this question. The mystic walked towards him slowly. His questions came one after another, and his aura became more and more oppressive. Why did they distribute the legendary anti-mystic equipment to mortals and rely on the kings, suzerains, governors, and bishops of this world to perform their duty of monitoring the world on their behalf? Why didn't they simply reveal their identities, rule over billions of living beings, and order everything in the world? Those who obey them will prosper, and those who oppose them will die? Just like what the extremists did? Asda stared at him intently, waiting for the student's response. What the old crow said, the boundaries of governance? No, that's only for mortals. Thales suppressed the first answer and realized that it was indeed a good question. He began to think about the logic behind it. Because the brave warriors defeated the evil dragon, not to become the evil dragon? All right, a joke. Because it's convenient? Because of laziness? Because of efficiency? Because they, are not free? You know, not every mystic has the time to help the underworld fight for territory. The air mystic continued to stare at him quietly. He did not respond to Thales' sarcasm. Thales could only stop teasing and said seriously, "All right." To be honest, what I can think of is that since they used the world cleansing plan to erase the existence of mystics, it would be inconvenient for the two empresses to appear in front of the world to prevent the effect of sealing off information and covering up history. Asta stared at him for a very long time. It was as if he wanted to connect to Thales' heart with his gaze. This made Thales a little nervous. Wait, did I stray from the topic? What did I ask just now? Finally, the air mystic smiled coldly. I have been curious about this question for a long time, and in order to solve it, Asta's gaze burned, I need more information. And Frulend was right about one thing. The guide said slowly, since the Battle of Eradication, the Jade Star royal family has been passed down for a long time and participated in many things. There must be many secrets that mystics do not know about. Thales slapped his forehead. Oh right. This is the reason why Asta joined the Three Disasters Alliance. So, you took the risk of having your address searched and registered as a member of the Frulend Mutual Assistance Group, with your real name to see references that are not available elsewhere and to research why the two empresses are so home buddies? Thales probed. Asta stared at him silently and did not move. All right, looks like he did not get the joke. Thales could only sigh. So, what is the conclusion of your research? Asta averted his gaze and turned to look outside the window. They hide. The mystic's eyes shone with a blue light again. His tone was empty, but it made people's hearts beat faster. It's because they are afraid, wary, and vigilant. The two empresses are afraid, wary, and vigilant? Thales was stunned and asked in confusion. Afraid of what? They are already the most powerful mystics. No one can control them. No one can control them. Thales paused and came to a realization. Oh, you mean Taurus? He has the power to surpass the two empresses? Taurus. Asta suddenly turned around. The blue light in his eyes was sharp. Thales was so shocked that he staggered. The mystic spoke slowly and very gently. I noticed just now that even though I rarely mentioned him, you seem to have some understanding of this senior. His gaze became sharp. The question is, where did you find out? Thales subconsciously gulped. As he endured Asta's invasive gaze, he remembered the words of the senior in the critical realm before he knocked on the door. Guiding you is Asta's responsibility. It is not convenient for me to interfere. In the group of mystics, there is a sacred and inviolable relationship between the guide and the guided. For example, you and Asta have a special and close connection. To each other, you are special and important existences. As he thought of this, Thales subconsciously said, Books. I read them from books. But Asta immediately asked, What books? Thales blurted out, Forbidden books. In the collection of Sunset Temple, the mystic continued to pursue him. Which book? Thales choked. He could not help but show an apologetic smile. All right, I'll tell you the truth. It's actually the records of the guards. The flag-bearer division of the Royal Guards. They record the words and actions of past generations of people. Asta narrowed his eyes. Whose records? The King of Renaissances. Thales did not even blink. Tormund I. He mentioned the, experiences of the Battle of Eradication. Among them was Taurus. Oh, the records are stored in Renaissance Palace. Do you want to take a look? Asta was silent for a few seconds. No. The mystic looked at him quietly. There is a legendary anti-mystic equipment inside. It's not safe. Thales looked as if he had just realized something. Oh, what a pity. Do you want me to steal it for you? No need, Asta said softly and turned around. But no. The mystic continued the topic. They're not afraid of Taurus. His words were filled with deep wariness. You can't imagine what level and height the Magic Empress has reached ever since she created the legendary anti-mystic equipment. I think that even someone as experienced as Taurus can't fight against the two empresses, who no one can control. Even Taurus can't fight against the two empresses? Thales was slightly shocked at first, then he asked doubtfully. Then what else can they be afraid of? Asda did not answer directly. Think, Thales, think. The mystic stared at the lake of stars that reflected the stars in the sky. Don't develop the bad habit of waiting for answers. Thales frowned. The two empresses who no one can control. No one. No. Thales' gaze shifted. It's not no one. Not entirely. Both of them. Thales stared at the chair that had been split in half in the corner and said seriously. Blood, Spike and Helen, as the victors of the Battle of Eradication, as mystics who surpassed most of their peers. He looked up at the mystic. The only people who can truly fight against the two empresses are each other. The teenager said solemnly. They are wary of each other. Asda snorted softly. Looks like you're not stupid after all. Thales' eyes brightened when he was acknowledged. So, without a common enemy, the two empresses became each other's greatest threat. After the war, they broke up and became enemies. And they hid behind the scenes to guard against each other's sneak attacks. This is a game where whoever finds the other first wins? In the face of the student's hopeful questioning, the mystic did not comment. He only said faintly, as I said before, you're getting closer to the truth of the world. This is probably Asda's version of, you're awesome, Thales criticized in his heart. Alright, now that you know this, what now? Thales returned to the main topic, preventing Asda from changing the topic. Don't tell me your purpose in joining the Three Disasters Alliance is to use the power of one of the two empresses to attack the other? Asda was silent for a while. But when he spoke again, his tone was different. Thales, are you sure you want to continue listening? The mystic said faintly. Thales was stunned. What? The mystic turned around. His figure blocked the moonlight, giving Thales a sense of oppression for the first time. You must know that the truth and secrets often carry heavy burdens. Asda spoke softly and meaningfully. Are you really ready? Looking at him, Thales frowned in confusion. Why do you suddenly sound like you're telling a ghost story? His teacher smiled coldly. Because once you know, you can't turn back. Can't turn back? Thales curled his lips nonchalantly. Even if I don't know, I can't turn back, right? What a joke. Do you really think that I, Thales Jadestar, the first person in Errol to turn misfortunes into blessings, was scared since I was young? At this point, Thales suddenly became vigilant. He raised his finger and said fiercely, and don't even think about ending the lesson now. Asda snorted indifferently. His emotions could not be discerned. But contrary to his usual behavior, he spoke rather straightforwardly. During the time I worked with Fruland, through the Jadestar royal family, the kingdom's secret intelligence department, and even Blood Bottle Gang, I obtained some precious historical records. Thales narrowed his eyes. About. Asda flashed a smile, which was rare. The meaning behind it was strange and difficult to understand. You already know that all legendary anti-mystic equipment was created by the two empresses, and none of them are effective against the two empresses, right? Thales could not help but look at him anxiously. He was puzzled. So, the mystic lowered his voice. What if there is an exception? What if there is an equipment in this world that was not created by the two empresses? Thales was stunned at first. Then he understood. Damn it. 18 years ago, the first and only legendary anti-mystic equipment in history that was not created by the Magic Empress. In the Prison of Bones, the mysterious voice of the leader of the Disaster Sword seemed to ring in his ears. In Constellation, on the base of this Dragon Breaker, it was just barely forged. So, what he said was right. Thales took a deep breath. So, you're going to tell me that you discovered a legendary anti-mystic equipment that is effective against the Magic Empress and is not recorded in the records? This time, Asda stared at him for a long time before he spoke seriously. In case you regret it after listening to me, I will ask you again. Are you sure you want to listen? Thales rolled his eyes in his heart. Cut the crap. The Duke was resolute and left no room for doubt. Speak. Why are you trying to be mysterious? Do you really think I don't know? The Dragon Breaker, the Blade of Purification, the greatest king's achievement, and also the only weapon that can possibly seal the two empresses, has been in his hands for a long time, and he has even used it before. Do you really think you can scare me by putting on this act and stirring up the atmosphere? Asda revealed a mysterious smile. Wait. When he thought of this, Thales felt a headache coming on. Aside from the indifference of having experienced hundreds of battles, How am I supposed to control the right amount of shock to show that I have seen the world, and not arouse his suspicion? In the Battle of Eradication, every legendary anti-mystic equipment was created by the two empresses, and then distributed to the chosen disaster hunters so that they could use their power to hunt down mystics. While Thales was thinking, the air mystic had already spoken. However, what Asda said was not what Thales thought. But after combining and comparing all the relevant records in Constellation, I confirmed something interesting. Some of the equipment was definitely distributed after the Battle of Eradication. Thales, who was looking forward to hearing about the Blade of Purification, did not react for a moment. He paused. So, this is very normal. The teenager picked his ears and continued following his train of thought. Although the war has ended, the hunt for the calamities is still ongoing. The two empresses' target is not only the extremists, but also other mystics, such as you. Moreover, a troublesome person like Giza is still alive and kicking. When he said this, Thales shuddered violently. Wait a minute. There's something wrong with what Asda said just now. Outside the study room, Vanguard Morgan and Protector Korsta stood facing each other. One had a cold expression, and the other was focused. Our Highness, Korsta stared at the door intently, but he did not hear any sound from inside. Sometimes does something unexpected, doesn't he? Morgan did not respond. Korsta snorted softly. Did you hear what Commodore said? They are in Scarlet District. Don't bother trying to get close to me, Thorn Barbarian, Vanguard Morgan rudely cut him off. He did not even look at Korsta. I'm not interested. Korsta, expression froze. Thorn Barbarian. Korsta, who had bronze skin and an exotic face, took a deep breath. That's right. My father is indeed from Thornland, but he is also a noble of Alumbia Kingdom, and my maternal grandmother is an Orthodox Constellatiate. Who cares who made you a bastard? Protector Morgan, who kept strangers away, raised his voice and snorted disdainfully. Just guard your door, Thorn Barbarian. Thorn Barbarian, Korsta breathing quickened and he clenched his fists. They said you are a veteran. Korsta's tone turned cold. But you were chased out by the army because you fled from battle? This sentence took effect. For the first time, Morgan moved his gaze to Korsta. But Korsta's tone became more mocking. That must be interesting, right? The Thorn Barbarian sneered. Didn't your commanding officer beat the *T out of you? The moment he finished speaking, Morgan's gaze changed. It was bone-chilling. The veteran's hand moved to his weapon. Remember, we are on duty. Korsta placed his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist and said coldly. So don't get any stupid ideas. Unless you want to be chased out by the guards outside the army? Morgan's hand stopped moving. His gaze was cold. Do you know why they chased me out? Korsta sneered disdainfully. Who cares? What are you doing? At that moment, the sudden appearance of the unfamiliar figure shocked Korsta and Morgan. Korsta instinctively drew his sword. Asterisk clang. Asterisk a sharp sound rang. Korsta withdrew his sword in time and stabbed it into the wall. It was only a foot away from the unfamiliar figure's neck. F***CK. F***CK. Korsta cursed fiercely. He withdrew his sword while still in shock. I almost F***king. Way, Master Vitano? Korsta and Morgan stared at the hunchbacked figure that appeared beside them. It was the watchman of Star Lake Fort. The old man, Vitano, was holding a lamp as he stood trembling in front of the door. When he remembered how polite Mallows was to the person before him, Korsta quickly sheathed his sword and changed his tone. You scared me. Hey, old man. Morgan was not as good-tempered. He glared at Vitano and sheathed the two short swords at his waist as well. What are you doing here? The shadow of the lamp swayed, and the figure trembled. Vitano slowly turned his head around and glanced at the two with his turbid eyes. Didn't you feel it? Wow, you can talk. Korsta was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He cleared his throat. I'm sorry, feel what? A rat. Vitano stared at the door of the study room. The old man raised the lamp and said with certainty, In the castle. There's a rat. No matter how much they disliked each other, Korsta and Morgan still exchanged glances. Even though their communication was not very efficient. Yes, we know. Morgan sized up the old man and said coldly, An old rat. Korsta smiled. Of course, the only place without rats in this damn castle should be the Rapid Shadow Tower. It's the nest of wild cats. But Vitano shook his head. His gaze never left the door. No. It's a rat from outside. Vitano looked at the door and said slowly but firmly, I'm not going to give up. A very, very big rat. Very big. Korsta and Morgan exchanged glances again. The man of thorns narrowed his eyes, pointed at his head, and lowered his voice. Hey, isn't he a little? Morgan pursed his lips and did not reply. But in the next second, Vitano's body trembled and he stepped forward. Hey! Two arms firmly blocked his way, one on the left and the other on the right. They also blocked his way. Please stop, Master Vitano. When he saw the direction the old man wanted to go, Korsta was firm and stern. If you really want to see the Duke, I can inform him first. This path is blocked. Morgan was even more concise. Vitano recovered from his shock while trembling. He began to size up the two people again. Are you royal guards? The old man asked softly. Korsta put down his arm and smiled. Yes, we are the royal family. In Star Lake Castle. You should jump, the old man said coldly. The words that came out of his mouth came out of nowhere. Korsta frowned. What? All of you? Vitano's words were drawn out. He was panting like a dying man. All of you should jump down from the castle. Jump down? Morgan's gaze sharpened. He placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. Jump down? Why? Korsta was puzzled. Vitano turned his head. He first glanced at Korsta, then glared at Morgan, and finally fixed his gaze on the door of the Duke's room. Because all of you are useless. You can't even catch a rat. The moment he finished speaking, the old man ignored the two puzzled people and turned around. Under the flickering light, he left the place with difficulty, step by step, and disappeared into the depths of the corridor. Korsta and Morgan stared at his back, unable to make heads or tails of it. D was right. Watching him walk away, Korsta shook his head. That old man, even if he's not a zombie, there's definitely something wrong with his brain. Kill him, Morgan said coldly. Yes. What? Korsta was stunned. Morgan stared at the cold corridor and gritted his teeth. His tone was chilling. The next time he appears like this, we will kill him together. Korsta blinked. Are you crazy? Morgan bared his teeth. His killing intent was overflowing. No, I'm serious. Korsta took a deep breath and looked around. No. O Lady of Harvest and Sunset Goddess above, why? Morgan snorted coldly. The veteran's gaze was sharp. Because, from the distance when we discovered him, he would have been able to kill us. Kill us? Ha ha ha, for Thornland's sake, I really can't King believe it. Korsta was puzzled and did not know whether to laugh or cry. All right, let's kill that old man, and then how do we explain it? Because he said that we, can't catch a rat? Morgan nodded. He still stared at the corridor as if there was some threat there. Yes. And he is the rat, the damned rat. Korsta looked confused. Crazy. The Thorn Man tried again and again, but in the end, he gave up and sighed. You and him, both of you are crazy. Oh Lady of Harvest above, if there's a next time, I'd rather be on duty with that crippled mute. The damn rat. Chapter 640. In the study, Thales stared at the mystic in a daze. After the war. The youth subconsciously repeated the words. Asda looked back at him with the ghost of a smile, as if he had seen his prey. After the war. After the war? Thales widened his eyes. It was as if a cord had been unraveled in his brain. Mr. Sakern, when did the relationship between the two empresses break and become hostile to each other? The mystic remained calm and answered in a tone that was neither too light nor too heavy. You've already told me. The next moment, the blue light in Asda's eyes lit up again. After the war. After the war. Thales held his breath. That means... The teenager slowly sorted out his thoughts, and his expression became more and more shocked. The two magic empresses fell out after the war and went their separate ways. The reason why they hid behind the scenes. The reason why they sealed mystic energy. The reason why they were enemies. The reason why they had such a tacit understanding. Thale's breathing quickened when he understood the crux of the matter. No, it's not the blade of purification. What the air mystic discovered was not the result of his grandfather's greatest king, nor was it the so-called perfect anti-mystic equipment. Sauron and the Supreme Ring, Thales muttered. He was drenched in cold sweat without realizing it. Asda was puzzled. What? Thales snapped out of his daze and shook his head. It's not important. It's just a Northland folktale. But then he widened his eyes. But the important thing is, if this inference is correct, these 2 points of time coincide. This means that these legendary anti-mystic equipment were only distributed to the disaster hunters after the Battle of Eradication. These legendary anti-mystic equipment, Thales said in a daze. It's very likely that they were made after the relationship between the two empresses broke down and they went their separate ways. He looked at his guide in disbelief. Under Thales' incredulous expression, Asda smiled and nodded slowly. He continued the rest of the sentence. One of the empresses, without the other party or even behind the other party's back. Made in secret and forged alone. The study became quiet. Only the candlelight chased away the darkness. Made in secret and forged alone. These words echoed in Thales' mind, causing him to be stunned on the spot. Because of this. The light in the mystic's eyes was faintly discernible. These armaments were forged in secret by only one party, and their secrets are not known by the other party. It is highly possible that they are strong enough to harm or even seal. The next moment, the blue light in Asda's eyes became extremely sharp. Another empress. When he heard this, Thales was completely stunned. He could only go back and forth, trying his best to digest this news. Forged by an empress in secret, it was a weapon forged solely by herself. Distributed to the disaster hunters after the war. Yet, he was able to seal another. And that means... Wait a minute. Thales snapped out of his daze and quickly raised his hand to stop the man from continuing. The teenager summoned the sin of Hell's River and tried hard to regulate his breathing so that he could digest this shocking news. He tried not to think of the shocking significance behind it. I understand, Mr. Sakern. This is no small matter, but before we come to a conclusion, we must be cautious. Thales lowered his voice and subconsciously looked around. First of all, we have to figure out why the legendary anti-mystic equipment cannot seal the two emperors. Is it because the two emperors, as the creators, understand the mechanism of the anti-mystic equipment? Or did they leave something behind in the equipment? In fact, what if the legendary anti-mystic equipment cannot seal the two emperors is not because the two emperors created them, but because of their level of power or something else? What if the two emperors' level or characteristics determine that they cannot be sealed? Thales looked at the mystic seriously and gesticulated to express his thoughts. Asda also stared at him quietly, his face expressionless. At this moment, they were like a pair of teacher and student, having the purest discussion about a certain problem. Your rebuttal is not without reason. Not long after, the guide spoke again. His voice was rational and clear. But this at least means that one of the two emperors has the ability to forge a legendary anti-mystic equipment alone. Thales clenched his fists. No, that is not necessarily the case. The teenager shook his head and questioned, why must the equipment issued after the war be forged by a certain empress alone, and not by the two emperors before they turned against each other? This does not prove that the two emperors can be. It does not prove your conclusion. Hearing this, Asda chuckled. He did not directly answer Thales' question, but changed to another topic. Do you know, with Constellation as an example, the origin and manufacturing information of the legendary anti-mystic equipment in each country can only be traced back to year 14 of the calendar of eradication? Year 14 of the calendar of eradication? Thales narrowed his eyes. That is the 4th year after Constellation was founded. That is also the year when the World Cleansing Project began, the mystic said casually. The World Cleansing Project. The term returned to Thales' mind and awakened many of his memories. The mystic leaned forward slightly, his tone full of suspicion and vigilance. The question is why? Why does the World Cleansing Project hide this information? Why? Thales did not answer. But a small voice rang in his heart. Because this information is crucial, very sensitive, very deadly. They must be hidden from the world. Thales took a deep breath, looked up and said, but this does not mean, Asda ignored his doubts and continued to speak. And why, Thales? Why for thousands of years, people have tacitly agreed that all legendary anti-mystic equipment cannot affect or seal the magic empress? Why? Thales was stunned. Did the two empresses tell them themselves? The mystic was extremely serious. And if not, Thales remembered something. After the war, the heroes of mankind used tragic facts to prove that all existing legendary anti-mystic equipment could not seal Bloodspike and Helen. In the prison of bones, Ricky's strange smile appeared in his mind. Someone, there must be someone. The teenager took a deep breath and continued to speak based on his memories and train of thought. To be precise, some disaster hunters must have tried. They held legendary anti-mystic equipment and attacked the magic empresses. Really crazy. Asda nodded. There was an indescribable fluctuation in his tone. And they failed, and not just once. That's why the world can come to such a firm conclusion. In the next second, the mystic's tone suddenly changed. The question is, which disaster hunters did it? Which equipment? Which empress? This question also aroused Thales' curiosity. He waited for the mystic's answer. There is no answer. Asda shook his head slowly. Even with Fruland and Giza's help and the support of the vast amount of information in Constellation, I did not find any records of the two empresses being assassinated by the legendary anti-mystic equipment. Only the conclusion that the two empresses are not afraid of the legendary anti-mystic equipment, which is as unquestionable as common sense, is circulated in the circle of those who have access to and use the legendary anti-mystic equipment, as if it is a self-evident truth. After listening to this, Thales' expression changed. There is no solid evidence, but there is an incomparably firm conclusion. That can only prove one thing. In other words, the conclusion is that they were. The mystic snorted coldly. That's right. When you just mentioned why the legendary anti-mystic equipment could not seal the two empresses, if we follow the clues, we can easily find that from the beginning, this concept has been very strange. Thales tensed up. Asda continued. Now, let's assume that the hunters who tried to assassinate the two empresses with the legendary anti-mystic equipment. Stop! Thales interrupted him forcefully, waving his hands in the air. No, there are too many hypotheses. It is too risky, there are too many uncertainties. Asda replied coldly. Hypotheses are one of the most important ways to advance knowledge. If we can verify it. Seeking proof. Thales took a deep breath and said seriously, but what if you can't even establish the basis of your hypothesis? What if no one had tried to assassinate the two empresses? If even the incident of someone assassinating the two empresses with a legendary anti-mystic equipment to prove that they cannot be sealed is false and non-existent, and was fabricated. When he said this, Thales was stunned. It had been fabricated by someone else. Seeing the teenager's dazed expression, the mystic snorted coldly. Yes. Thales. If the assassinations were fake, if the story such as somebody tried to assassinate the two emperors and it was discovered that the anti-mystic equipment was ineffective against the two emperors a long time ago, were fabricated and told to the world, and the two emperors simply allowed them to spread for thousands of years. Asda did not continue, but his eyes were extremely sharp. Thales nodded and continued the conversation absent-mindedly. That's even more proof that there's a big problem behind these rumors and the concept that people with ulterior motives have fabricated. Looking at him, Asda smiled. Now let's go back to the previous step. If those assassinations were true. If there's really someone who's not afraid of death, if there's really a hunter who tried to assassinate the two empresses with the legendary anti-mystic equipment. The mystic's words made Thales gulp unconsciously. He felt as if he had returned to 700 years ago and saw those crazy warriors. Then they can only happen when the two empresses have yet to live in seclusion. At least then, the hunters can still find them and carry out more than one assassination. Asda's tone became very soft and gentle, but to Thales, it sounded as heavy as a mountain. And here comes the problem. First, the humans assassinate them, then the two empresses live in seclusion. Is there any logical connection between this? The mystic said softly. Why? Why is it so coincidental? If those assassinations completely failed, and the legendary anti-mystic equipment was also proven to be ineffective against the creator, then why would the two empresses live in seclusion? Is it really as you said, because they're very home buddies? At the end, Asda made a rare joke that was neither too big nor too small. But Thales was not in the mood to listen to his jokes. The teenager shook his head and sorted out his thoughts. No, it's a little messy, a little messy. Why did the two empresses live in seclusion after they encountered the ineffective assassinations in the eyes of the world? No. Thales rubbed his forehead desperately. No, you can't infer cause from effect. This is too hasty. Have you ever played Sudoku? Thales was stunned and looked up. What? Asta looked at the air and moved his fingers gently. Sometimes when there is insufficient evidence, we need to fill in a certain number in the blank, and then go through step by step to verify, test, and compare to verify whether the number is in line with the rules of the game. The mystic turned his head back. Verify whether it is the only answer. Now, break your preconceptions, let go of your shackles, and wander in your imagination, Thales. Think about it if our guess is true. There was a hint of bewitchment in his tone. If the legendary anti-mystic equipment forged by an empress alone can really seal another empress, if after the war, they are strangely sent to the secular world and equipped to the calamity hunters in the mortal world, as he listened to the mystic, Thales' eyebrows furrowed. F***CK. All right, let's not talk about anything else first. Let's assume that this is true. Follow this logic and fill in the number. The teenager gulped. All right, if this is the truth behind the assassination of the two empresses, then... Thales took a deep breath and forced himself to enter the mystic's line of thought. A long time ago, the magic empress was not assassinated by a crazy mortal. Instead, she was assassinated by another empress, her former collaborator, current competitor, and future nemesis, by the legendary anti-mystic equipment forged by the other party alone. Asta looked at him silently. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and the blue light in his eyes flowed at a constant speed. Who was it? Thales raised his head, his gaze sharp. Forging the equipment behind the other party's back and using a mortal to plot an assassination. Was this done by Helen or Bloodthorn? My guess. The mystic said faintly. Both. He snorted in disdain. The two bitches did the same thing. Thales frowned. Asta continued to speak. Both of them betrayed each other and secretly created secret weapons that could seal each other. At the same time, they planned to use the hands of mortals to give each other a fatal blow. After the Battle of Eradication, they would enjoy the supreme throne of mystic energy alone. But... Asta stared at the starry sky outside the window and did not continue. But they survived, Thales muttered. The two empresses met their match. They saw through each other's schemes and escaped from the equipment that could threaten them. This was the real reason why they avoided the secular world and hid behind the scenes, so that no one could find them. The more Thales spoke, the more shocked he became. Because from that moment on, they could no longer walk around the world without fear. The two empresses had grasped the secret of sealing the mystics, and with the greatest malice towards each other, they each forged weapons that could seal each other. They then distributed them to the hunters, and as time passed, they scattered them to various countries. Thales said. They were hidden in the so-called legendary anti-mystic equipment that could not seal the magic empress. Thales froze in place. All the equipment could seal mystics. But there were a few that could seal the magic empress. Asta raised his head and let out an unusually pleased laugh. Therefore, they were afraid, wary, and vigilant. Among the legendary anti-mystic equipment possessed by the secular mortals in various countries, there were a few special equipment that they did not recognize. They came from the hands of their mortal enemies, but they could endanger themselves. The mystic stopped laughing and the killing intent in his eyes rose. Then the question left for us is, which one? Thales raised his head abruptly. Which one? With indescribable panic he asked, which legendary anti-mystic equipment was forged alone, and which magic empress could be sealed? But Asta's emotions cooled down. He shook his head. As I said, all the production records of the legendary anti-mystic equipment have been destroyed. We do not know. Thales gritted his teeth. At that moment, countless weapons flashed through his mind. The supreme sword, the staff of constellation, the dark night black coffin, the supreme shield, the motionless bow, the rising sun saber, the severing soul's blade, the soul slayer pike, the crossbow of time. Which ones are, which ones are not, which ones might be? Wait. Thales seemed to have thought of something. He sighed, and there was disappointment on his face. We might not know, but the empresses might not. They know which equipment was made by themselves, and which was definitely not. Besides, it has been 700 years. If such equipment really existed, they would have found it a long time ago. It would have been completely sealed or even destroyed to eliminate the threat. But the mystic had a different opinion. They can't do it. Thales frowned. Why? Asda was calm and unruffled. He enjoyed the night view of Star Lake Castle. Firstly, to them, each other is the most terrifying enemy. If one of them wants to find a certain equipment that can restrain them, Thales understood and came to a realization. Then the other party will definitely do their best to protect or hide it. Asda nodded. Secondly, they are like us. Like us. Thales' thoughts turned. I understand now. The teenager clapped his hands and said in realization, if those special legendary anti-mystic equipment are really effective against them, then the two empresses will not be able to touch or even get close to them, just like how you can't get close to Eternal Star City and Renaissance Palace. So, if they want to deal with these equipment, they must rely on others, in the secular world, those who are not mystics, to do the work for them. The mystic nodded. So, they will never and cannot appear in front of the world. Asda's gaze focused. But they will use their unimaginable power behind the scenes, stretch out their tentacles and claws, and stir up the world. Stir up the world. In the secular world. Thales' thoughts became clearer. Thirdly, Asda continued, the hypothesis has been completed. Now, it is time for us to find evidence and verify it. In the next second, he looked at Thales and uttered a word. Peninsular War. Thales' gaze shifted. What? Asda regained his elegant demeanor. From the beginning of the 2nd century to the end of the 5th century in the calendar of eradication, the Eastern Peninsula and the Western Peninsula experienced 4 peninsular wars. But why? Peninsular wars. Thales sank into deep thought. The two peninsulars are separated by a great distance, and it is difficult to hear from each other. Aside from a few countries, the profits from the wars can only barely cover the cost of the expeditions. Then, why do the rulers and vassals of the various countries want to cross the ocean to start a war? Is it really for hegemony and benefits? Standpoint and politics? The mystic's change in tone made Thales nervous. Or is it because of some inconvenient, or even more terrifying existences who can't take action? Thales' gaze shifted. He remembered a memory. It was 7 years ago, before he went on a diplomatic mission to Extet and arrived at Broken Dragon Fortress. It was in the snow-covered birch forest. Blood, blood clan, death, betrayal. A certain queen's words echoed in his ears. As for the Dark Knight Black Coffin, perhaps many forces hope to obtain a legendary anti-mystic equipment. But rest assured, among those who understand its value and origin, no one would have the guts to covet the Dark Knight Black Coffin, except for the terrifying mystics. When he thought of this, the teenager was instantly shocked. Damn it. F***CK, Thales took a deep breath. You let me calm down. This is too. Asda snorted coldly and did not speak again. Thales calmed down and shook his head. No, the evidence is still not enough. A hypothesis is still a hypothesis. But it is worth risking everything to verify it, the mystic said faintly. Even if there is only a 1 in 10,000 chance. Their gazes met in the candlelight. One of them was solemn, while the other was light and indifferent. At that moment, it was as if Thales was the patient and patient teacher, and Asda was a bold and rash student. A few seconds later. All right, if this is true. Thales sighed. If there really is a legendary anti-mystic equipment created by one empress and able to seal another empress in this world, then why is it that no one in the world knows about it? When he said this, Thales paused. Asda's laughter traveled into his ears. Of course the people don't know about it. Because they don't allow it. Thales stared at him. This is the most interesting part. 2 empresses, spear and shield, opposing each other, balancing and restraining each other. Asda had a faint smile on his face. After seeing through each other's tricks, the 2 empresses who turned against each other and became enemies may be furious, hate each other to the bone, and be on guard against each other. But for their own safety. The mystic's words were resolute and resolute, like the sharpest blade that cut through all flukes. They also had to maintain the most basic tacit understanding. They had to work together and completely suppress this secret. They had to seal it forever so that no one in the world, no mortals, especially mortals who understand the history of mystics and the hunters who control the legendary anti-mystic equipment, would know the most terrifying truth. Asda's tone became lighter and lighter, like a sharpened blade, becoming sharper and thinner. In other words, the secret weapon that sealed the two empresses has actually been in their hands since the Battle of Eradication. What people need to do is to know and believe, search and verify it. Then, they can break the unquestionable creed in their hearts. The candlelight around them was as warm as ever. However, the ceiling was dead silent. Only starlight shone through the darkness outside the window. Some shone in the sky, and some rippled on the surface of the lake. A few seconds later, Asda said softly, "Thales, you asked me before, are we the ones who brought about the bloody year?" Thales did not answer, but his expression became more solemn. "That's right." Asda smirked coldly. "Can you imagine how shocking, crazy and terrifying this secret is to the two empresses? And how excited they are? I don't know who brought about the bloody year." The mystic stared at Thales. "But I am certain that once there are any rumors or signs in this world, even if they only hint at this terrifying secret, that a few legendary anti-mystic equipment are the nemesis of the two empresses." Thales subconsciously clenched his fists. Out of consideration for their safety and their fear of each other, the two empresses who stand at the top may not directly appear and attack. The mystic's words became even more terrifying. "But they will temporarily put down their unforgettable hatred, give up everything, use all their madness, mobilize all their power in the secular world, track down the source at all costs, seal the news, cut off the spread, and ensure that anyone who already knows the secret." Asda's gaze became fierce. "Does not exist anymore." Thales trembled slightly. "Even if there are piles of bones and rivers of blood, lives will be plunged into misery and suffering." Thales breathed in a daze. It was also the Jade Star royal family that went to Hell's River together during the bloody year. In the prison of bones, Ricky's voice rose again. "The ferryman's bell. Can you imagine?" The blue light in the mystic's eyes became clearer, but his tone became more fanatical. It was just like the first time he saw Thales in the chess room. The magic empresses were so high up and unreachable. He chuckled, as if he had seen through something. But because of their enmity, they fell into a quagmire and fell into the secular world. Like us, they had to rely on children's games. "We put up a fight on the streets, and they called for war in the mainland." Asda's tone turned cold, and he regained his composure. "There is no difference between the two." After listening to this, Thales sat on the desk in a daze. He was dazed. "Do you know, Asda Sakern?" he said slowly, his voice was hoarse. It was as if he had just fought the most difficult battle. "You are AF** King Genius." The mystic looked at him. In the so-called alliance of the three disasters, when Giza and Fruland were racking their brains to improve their strength or to seek external objects, but to no avail. Thales looked up and stared at him in disbelief. "But you found the possible weakness of the two empresses, or at least a suspicious point, by collecting information, sorting out intelligence, piecing together fragments, analyzing logic, restoring history, and looking for flaws." Asda was expressionless, but he nodded slightly. "We had a conversation about this. Magic is not just about suffocating, squeezing people into balls, or even throwing chairs at you. Collecting information, filtering intelligence, comparing authenticity, looking for key points, connecting nodes, and arriving at the final discovery." The air mystic stared at the old and dilapidated bookshelf on the other wall. His tone was mechanical, and his emotions were unclear. "This is also magic. We are all on the path to omniscience, identifying the direction to move forward." Both of them were silent for a while. "So now that you know this, let's say it's a suspicious point," Thales said cautiously. "What are you going to do?" Asda shook his head. "Not me. But you. What should you do?" Thales frowned. "What?" Asda turned around. At this moment, he was as sharp as a weapon. "Welcome to the Anti-Emperor Club, Thales." The mystic said faintly, "Because from the moment you learned the secret, you officially became the mortal enemy of Bloodspike and Helen." Thales was shocked. "Because of it, the legendary two empresses of magic will not let you go. There is no possibility of a buffer or reconciliation." Asda narrowed his eyes. "Think about the bloody year, child. They will fight with you. Until one of them dies." Thales paused for a few seconds before he realized what he meant. F***ck, the teenager muttered. As I said, the burden of the truth and the secret. Asda looked at him expressionlessly and spoke in the most beautiful and pleasant voice in the world. It is very heavy. That's right, it's the new year. End of this chapter. Chapter 641. Duke Thales had been in a bad mood recently. According to a well-informed insider from the 7 Jade Star attendants family, who did not want to reveal his name, to protect the person involved, we will use the pseudonym B. Here, the prince did not enjoy his meals. He was listless in class, overworked himself in martial arts class, had a lot on his mind when he was deep in thought, and would sometimes shut himself off and be in a daze. Occasionally, he would sigh and lament about life. As for the reason, there were different opinions in the Star Lake fort. Some said that it was the resentment after being exiled, some said that the Duke had quarreled with Officer Mallows again, and some guessed that it was because the Logistics Division's bill for the past few months was not good. But our reliable informant B. Pseudonym, gave the most direct reason. On the night that Costa and Morgan were on duty, Duke Thales was training hard in his own room. He was sweating profusely and had climaxes one after another. He was intoxicated and was on the verge of death when a few rats barged in and disturbed him. The prince, whose mood was ruined, was furious. He pulled out his sword and slashed at them. According to the person who cleaned up the mess, even the poor chair was cut in half. Of course, the exact news still needed to be further revealed by B. Pseudonym. Danny Doyle. Mammy Valencia, who had just arrived at the castle, roared. Her voice reverberated throughout the castle and chased D., who was chatting happily with the maids, out of the room. Your duty is to hold the sword, not to chat. If I catch you again, I'll beat you up. As time went by, Star Lake Fort became more and more perfect from the construction to the staffing. For example, the new supervisor nanny, Ashley Valencia, was strict in her manner and her methods were strict. The most common phrase that came out of her mouth was, I'll F***ck. According to the well-informed B. A pseudonym, he even heard Nanny threaten Officer Mallows once. It's okay, Mammy. At the dining table, Thales, who was wearing a scarf, was listless. I was the one who encouraged D. to chat more with everyone, so that the castle would not be too quiet and lifeless. Mammy Valencia's anger had not yet subsided. He used your affairs as a topic to talk about. What he talked about were all baseless rumors, some of which would ruin your reputation if spread out. Everyone is curious about the secrets of the Duke of Star Lake's life. But Thales just waved his hand and did not care about it. Be it rumors or the truth, there has to be an exit. Instead of letting others find this exit and make wild guesses, Thales shook his head nonchalantly. Mammy Valencia turned around and looked at him kindly, as if she was looking at her own grandson. Oh, my dear, your highness, everything about you is good, but your heart is too soft. The granny had been in charge of more than one large family. She had a good reputation and was respected. Even though she was over 60 years old, she was still full of energy. She, who was planning to retire, was specially invited by Baron Quinton to come to Star Lake Castle. She was in charge of taking care of the Duke's meals and lodging, as well as managing the newly hired servants in the castle. Now, my dear, you must be very hungry. Mammy Valencia skillfully served the dishes. Eat quickly. Remember, the quantity must be sufficient, and the variety must be balanced. Thank you, Mammy. Thales nodded and pointed at a plate of roasted vegetables awkwardly. But, I don't like lettuce as much as the rumors say, so can I change it to something else? Mammy Valencia's smile did not diminish, but she raised her wrist and instantly pulled out a pointer. F***ck. Thales shuddered and subconsciously raised his hand to protect his face. *slap. There was an explosion. In the next second, a certain black cat that had climbed in through the window and was sneaking its head towards the Duke's dining table jumped pathetically, dodging the Mammy's pointer in the nick of time. Meow! The black cat jumped off the dining table and leaped to the corner. It glared at the Mammy angrily with its fur puffed up. That is not something you should eat. Mammy Valencia withdrew her pointer and stared expressionlessly at the furious black cat. You uncultured brute. Thales put down his arms awkwardly, but when he heard that, he shuddered. Meow. Meow meow. Meow 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 meow. The black cat said a few harsh words and looked at the Duke's dining table unwillingly. In the end, it chose to give up. It leaped out of the door without looking back, bringing back Doyle's screams along the way. "No, no! That was my lunch. Ah, it's you again, you stupid cat. This little brute is obviously inexperienced. How dare you eat under my nose?" Valencia turned around and became kind and gentle again. "Sorry, dear, what did you say just now?" Under the mammy's understanding smile, Thale's appetite increased. He picked up the plate of roasted lettuce excitedly and ate it with relish. He had no complaints or regrets. In the past few months, besides hiring servants and workers, the logistics division had also brought back different breeds of rat-catching cats from the market and the fields according to Duke Thale's inexplicable but unquestionable orders. Together with the original nests of stray cats in the castle, the annoying rat infestation in Star Lake Castle was finally greatly reduced. The newly purchased wooden furniture survived, and the stored food in the warehouse was no longer short of weight. Even the number of plant hoppers was reduced by a lot. Piles of rat corpses were even found in the cracks of the ceiling of the Duke's room. The effect was unbelievably good. However, the increase in the number of cats brought new troubles. Firstly, the tapestries and cloth furniture started to suffer. Secondly, the environment full of cat fur made Lord Mallow sneeze continuously for a week. The servants had to increase the frequency of cleaning. Thirdly, at night, there would be cat meowing outside and outside the castle, disturbing people's sleep. Regarding this, Miss Jenny, who relied on her strength and wisdom to dominate the Star Lake Castle stable, but was helpless against the nimble cats scurrying around on the roof, had a lot of complaints. To make matters worse, the stray cats around Star Lake Castle also began to gather here. The teaching whip in Mammy Valencia's hands was no longer limited to DD, but became an official cat-chasing stick. A cunning black cat even dared to break into the kitchen and even the Duke's study and dining room time and time again. It looked around innocently and curiously, observing the humans, but it was actually full of evil tricks. If it was not careful, it would scratch and break things and steal the food. The second-class protector of the Star Lake Guards, Jose Costa, was born in the Alumbia Kingdom. According to him, who was very familiar with cats, the cat culture in Thornland had been prevalent for a long time. If this continued, Star Lake Castle would be full of kittens in a few months' time. Once the cat species overflowed, everything from the castle's tablecloths and tapestries, to the warehouse's kitchen, to the crow's nest at the top of the castle, and even the bird's nest lake around Star Lake would be affected. The situation was critical. The decisive Lord Mallow's planned to destroy the cats, but was stopped by Duke Thales. Following His Highness' unexpected train of thought, the logistics division brought back a new answer the next week. Dogs. From the majestic and humane Ludo dog to the ferocious and aggressive raging wolf dog that specialized in hunting, from the pure and loyal watchdog to the cowardly pet dog, the Star Lake Fort had turned into a dog training ground. It had also reconstructed the ecological chain and successfully prevented the wild cats from gathering further. When there are more rats, we will buy cats. When there are more cats, we will buy dogs. When there are more dogs, we will. According to this logic, will we have to buy a king one day? Apprentice Vanguard Ness's complaint, an hour before he was whipped by the penal officer. This made Miss Jenny very happy, because she only spent a day to subdue the most majestic Ludo, Petrick, and the most ferocious raging wolfhound, Arkeberg. In addition to the stable horses that were originally under her iron hooves in a literal sense, Jenny successfully established her absolute rule on the first floor of the Star Lake Fort, becoming the queen of the land in name and in reality in the fort. In addition, there were also the Wild Cat Empire that coveted the Duke's dining table every day, the Flying Bird Alliance that occupied the tree trunks and messenger crows, and the evil rat swarm that was heavily injured and was forced to retreat to the wild and underground. The four major clans in Star Lake Fort were in a standoff with each other. They were second only to the glorious and great Duke Thales and the strict and solemn Valencia Nanny. Their leaders were known as the Four Dark Kings of Star Lake Fort. Even though other than the Queen of the Land Jenny, the other three kings of the other clans had yet to be confirmed, but this bloody and cruel story of the struggle for hegemony in Star Lake Fort was enough to prove how boring it was for DD to make them up and give them nicknames one by one. Fortunately, just as Duke Thales, who was badly battered by dog urine and dog feces, was preparing to let the logistics division go to the market and the village to restock, adjust the ecological environment, and maintain the castle's tidiness, Captain Mallows and Mammy Valencia decisively intervened and stripped the Duke of his leadership over the castle's governance, only retaining his formal right to make suggestions. So, with the concerted efforts of the Duke of Star Lake Castle and his loyal subordinates, the gloomy and dilapidated castle, which had been in disrepair for a long time, welcomed new life. The castle gate was repaired, the sentry posts were readied, the doorways, moats, stairs, and outer walls were cleaned and renovated, provided that the back was ignored. The courtyard and garden were free of weeds and dust, and the stable and racecourse were especially clean and beautiful. Miss Jenny's peddling supervisor contributed a lot to this. At first glance, it looked grand and majestic. In the castle, more and more halls, rooms, corridors, warehouses, and cellars were cleaned up. Thales finally recognized the 5 ways to get from the main hall to the Wolf's Tower, including the hidden aerial walk that was discovered by the black cat that came to steal food from time to time. As long as you are not afraid of falling from the outer walls and becoming a meat patty. Mallow's kind reminder. The kitchen, washroom, and sewer were also unobstructed again. D was very proud of this. And when His Highness the Duke came back from Eternal Star City one time and got off the carriage with his hands covering his but with an unpleasant expression, even the weeds and rocks by the lake outside the castle were cleaned up and replaced with fine sand and soft soil. A clear, stable, and solid road was combed out, so that the people who went to and from Eternal Star City and Star Lake Castle would no longer have to suffer the pain of bumps and unspeakable pain. Under Duke Thales' name, the nearby fields and fiefs were also gradually straightened out their subordinate relationships, thanks to Teacher Julio's great help. Adrian understood Mallows. This former herald liked to arrange everything clearly and methodically. He was even more used to preparing for a rainy day, and being prepared for any eventuality. Correspondingly, Mallows did not like accidents, and hated taking risks. There was no improvisation in his dictionary. Any situation that was not in his plans would make him frown. In that case, it was really difficult for him to serve Prince Thales. What a pity! The original intention of the Watchmen of the Royal Guards was to deal with accidents. Toledo, Glover, Tang-Exian, Proca, Trefanov. The Star Lake Guards greeted their former colleagues from Renaissance Palace with stern faces. The latter also had solemn expressions, and a few of the Royal Guards were even unwilling to let them touch their mounts. Their armor and helmets were not removed, their weapons were not used, and they were not even willing to say much. They had only been separated for a few months, but there was already a gap between them. Only Doyle was beaming with joy, waving and greeting everyone he was familiar with, whether they were familiar with him or not. Yo bro, you look very familiar. Which wing transferred you from? Wow, you are so strong, and your helmet is so cool. We are all the Emperor's Praetorian Guards. Don't be so cold. Many people did not know whether to answer or not, and it was extremely awkward. Captain Adrian saw all this, but he did not bat an eyelid. He just walked forward with Mallows and sized up the brand new Star Lake Fort. I can see that you have run this place well. I haven't seen Star Lake Fort like this for many years. Swoosh. Meow. Before he finished speaking, a yellow-spotted cat chased after a messenger crow, and both of them flew past in front of them, kicking up dust that landed on Adrian's boots. The captain could not help but choke on his words. Mallows' expression was also a little unpleasant. In that case. Ow. Chasing after the cat and bird, a small puppy clumsily pounced over, tripping over itself once, and staggered as it chased after the cat and bird. So enthusiastic. Captain Adrian finally found an adjective with great difficulty, and he coughed softly. That's right, there are more small animals. More small animals. Mallows looked at the chaotic scene in the distance, and thought of a certain duke's genius idea of using a cat to control a mouse, and using a dog to control a cat. He could not help but rub his slightly itchy nose and calmly replied, Please excuse me. Star Lake Fort has been empty for many years, so it's full of wild interest. So, are you implying that Renaissance Palace and the Royal Guards did not give you enough financial support? I did not say that. Do you usually speak to Duke Thales in this manner as well? I dare not. Mallows did not look ashamed at all. The setting sun is my witness. I have always been courteous and respectful to Prince Thales. Before Adrian could reply, the Duke of Star Lake himself had already arrived, accompanied by his attendant. How can I have the honor of being honored by the guardian of Renaissance Palace? Thales was full of smiles. Adrian bowed and was about to reply when Thales cheerfully interrupted him. So, Lord Adrian, my old man finally could not hold back and sent you to get rid of me to prevent future trouble? When he said this, everyone looked at him sideways, and Wuxia, who was behind him, turned pale with fright. Adrian's expression stiffened a little, and he looked at Mallows. The watchman politely returned him a smile. Sorry, the Duke has been suffering from constipation recently, and he's not in a good mood. What? This time, it was Thales' turn to frown. You know about this too? Don't tell me that you always stand guard outside the toilet, move based on the smell, and observe feces? That's not necessary. Mallows was unmoved. You only need to count the amount of clean silk you use every time you go to the toilet. It's obvious that you go a lot and stay in the toilet for a long time, but you use very little. I don't want to guess that you don't like cleanliness, so there's only one answer. Thales froze. All right, I did shut myself in the toilet and think for a long time over the past few days. But... He glared at Mallows. Constipation? Really? Captain Adrian narrowed his eyes and cast Mallows a gaze that could only be understood by the tacit understanding between them. Respectful? Mallows returned him an indifferent gaze. Absolutely. I'm a prince. Don't I even have the privacy to poop? Thales was indignant. But before the autumn harvest, you can't even afford to hire an extra laundry maid. Mallows was merciless and delivered a fatal blow. The prince felt short of breath and had nothing to say. Adrian thought about it. All right, they are indeed expressing their dissatisfaction with Renaissance Palace's financial support. Just as Thales was racking his brains to think of words to reply to Mallows, Captain Adrian coughed. Anyway, Your Highness, I am indeed here with a mission, the captain said with a smile. But it's not what you think. You're old. Ahem. His Majesty ordered me to escort the kingdom's meritorious hero back to his hometown to rest. Meritorious hero? Thales narrowed his eyes. Nowadays, there are still people who can become. But before he could finish speaking, a unique voice came from behind him. Wow, you've grown up, child. Thales was shocked when he heard that. As the voice faded away, another group of people followed behind the royal guards and stepped into the castle's gate. They stood tall, had awe-inspiring auras, and moved swiftly. It was obvious that they were soldiers. Thales' gaze was fixed on the leader. A guest in casual clothes stepped down from the stirrups and walked out of the group with a laugh. He walked towards Thales. You look like an adult now. Behind the prince, Wuxia was pleasantly surprised. Ralph could only impatiently remind him to maintain his composure. Thales controlled his breathing and smiled as he stared at his old acquaintance whom he had not seen for many years. The guest was not tall, but her posture was confident and at ease. She calmly walked past the Star Lake guards and royal guards and arrived in front of Thales. You look like an adult. In fact, you are the 21st person to say this about me, but I am still very happy. Thank you for acknowledging me. A few seconds later, the Duke of Star Lake took a step forward. Although it was not polite, he sincerely bowed to the guest in front of him, the woman who stood out among the men. It has been a long time since we last met. I missed you. Welcome to my castle, honorable lady. Sonia Cecere. Sonia. Doyle, who was in the queue, was shocked when he heard this. He whispered, What? So that's the fortress. Glover, who was beside him, bumped into him. Shut up. But even the zombie himself stared at the woman. While the people of Star Lake Fort were shocked, the veteran Jenned walked over from behind. He excitedly took the reins of Sonia's steed and hugged his old colleagues from the Star Lake Army. You said that your castle is. Sonia stretched and strode forward, ignoring the guards who had powerful backgrounds around her. Your castle. Thales nodded cheerfully and followed her. Mallows and Captain Adrian, who were ignored, looked at each other and followed her. They were not unhappy that they were left out. Most of the people did not complain either. They just followed quietly and stared at Sonia's back. The legendary figure who suppressed the fortress for 19 years by herself, made the enemy hesitate and not dare to advance, and made the great dragon's wings unable to fly. Except for Thales. Thales stared at the familiar female warrior in front of him. What appeared in his mind was her valiant and heroic figure of wielding a broadsword as if it was light. She cut through the blood mystic's heavy encirclement in a graceful and calm manner in the blood rain that filled the sky. She protected a 7-year-old child behind her, spun around and raised her shield to slay demons. At this moment, Sonia's laughter was still cheerful and bright. It dispelled the haze and gave people endless confidence and hope. I observed for a while on the way here. Sonia walked to the periphery with familiar ease. She casually plucked a cattail fruit from a drooping tree branch, but she led a large group of people to take a strange turn with her. She pointed at the defense around Star Lake Fort. The positions and spacing of the sentries in the castle, including the patrol frequency and movement lines of the sentries outside the fort, are all the responsibility of the Defense Division. F***CK. I'm dying of jealousy. I'm not familiar with this yet. Which protector designed this? Protector. Doyle's eyes lit up when he heard this. He adjusted the collar of his uniform and put on an aloof expression. Just as he was about to step forward, "It's me, Your Excellency." Vanguard Glover spoke calmly behind her. Sonia turned around. It was very strange. Compared to the aloof and indifferent zombie's reputation, the current Glover was very respectful and polite. It could even be said that he was overly polite. Thanks to the trust and request of a fellow member of the Defense Division, I took charge of the preparation work for the defense of the castle. A fellow member of the Defense Division. Everyone's gazes turned in unison and stared at the protector with the highest rank. About that, the first-class protector of the Star Lake Guards, Danny Doyle, whispered awkwardly, "As the representative of the Defense Division, I have a lot of work to do, such as the sewers and the gossip about the Duke." "You big guy." Sonia walked through the crowd and ignored the expectant Doyle. She walked up to Glover with interest. "You?" Glover nodded solemnly and then added, "Apart from that, First Officer Sue Earl Toledo and First Officer Freddie Tunsin of the Command Division, Second Officer Leo Morgan and Novice Officer Nate Ness of the Vanguard Division, Second Officer Ad Bastia and Novice Officer Michelle Ferry of the Defense Division, and Second Officer Leo Paloga and Novice Officer Vincenzo Italiano of the Logistics Division all have help." Busy. After hearing so many names, everyone's gazes turned to Doyle again. "How do you say this?" Doyle's face stiffened and he whispered, "This is called learning from others' strengths, hee." As Doyle spoke, he suddenly bumped Glover with his arm. The zombie was stunned for a few seconds and did not react. Until Doyle bumped him a second time. Of course." Glover was shocked and suddenly stuttered. Doyle was still elbowing him in the middle. "Some of the key no overall, In the end, all of the defensive plans were, from the very beginning it was supported by Chief Mallows." "Oh, it was supported by Duke Thales and Chief Mallows." "Oh, it was under their correct leadership. It was under their strong guidance throughout the entire process. In the end, it was the one that made positive progress, was successfully produced and passed the review." Guidance. That's right, if a check mark on a piece of paper counts as guidance, Thales thought helplessly. Glover twisted his neck with difficulty. It felt as if there was a snake coiled in his throat. We did not disgrace our mission and gained a lot." Doyle bumped him again. Glover's face was full of grief and indignation, but he still added the last sentence reluctantly. "And await your review and correction, Your Excellency, the Fortress Flower." Everyone looked at Glover helplessly. In the end, they all turned their disdainful gazes to Doyle. "What's wrong?" But in the next moment, the Fortress Flower grabbed Glover's collar and pulled him until he bent over pathetically so that he was parallel to Sonia. Sonia blinked and bit her lip. Her smile became even more perverted. "Don't worry, we'll talk about some, more interesting things." Once she finished speaking, Sonia laughed and strode forward. Thales turned around and glanced at Glover before he quickly caught up with Sonia's back. The group started moving again, but everyone looked at Glover with even more strange gazes. Only Mallows and Adrian were on the other side. They did not care and lowered their heads to discuss something. As for Glover himself, he stood on the spot and rubbed his chest, trying to understand what had just happened. TSK. Zombie, you're going to be rich." Doyle put his hands on his waist and sized up his partner with a surprised expression. "The chance to fight for 20 years less is tonight." Glover riches. "You said that the words you said just now would come in handy and make the officers happy. Glover remembered something and said to Doyle in annoyance. But when you said it, I felt like a fool. Eh. Doyle shook his finger with a, you don't understand expression. Trust me, you're right. Even if you didn't make them happy, they definitely won't be unhappy. Glover had a doubtful expression. Is that so? Don't worry, Doyle patted his chest. It's definitely right. Zombie shook his head. F*CK, Doyle on the other hand, crossed his arms and put away his smile after his excitement died down. He looked at Sonia, who was surrounded by people from afar. So, that's the fortress flower? You don't believe me? No, that's not what I mean, Doyle shook his head. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. It's just a feeling. Feeling. Glover answered casually, but he was troubled by the private chat in Sonia's room that night and did not hear what his partner said. Yes, it's a feeling. Sonia sincere. She's not tall and her voice isn't loud, but when she stands there. Doyle seemed to be deep in thought. I can't seem to see anyone else. Including Mallows, Captain Adrian, and even His Highness. Glover did not understand this sentence either. He only spat and lamented his bad luck today. Are you going to spend the night here, sir? On the other side, Mallows and Adrian walked forward slowly and spoke softly. No, the royal guards are only escorting Lady Cecile back to her hometown to show His Majesty's favor and trust. Lord Adrian looked at the few royal guards who came with him. They were taking care of the horses. Since we have completed our mission, we will immediately return to the capital city and report to His Majesty. That's good. Mallows did not say anything, but Adrian pondered for a while. By the way, your subordinates, they seem to have distanced themselves from Renaissance Palace? Mallows' eyes flashed. Obviously. Chapter 642. The moonlight was cold, and the funeral song in his ears stopped. What replaced it was the fortress flower's laughter and the shouts of her soldiers. Depose the Duke and destroy Zayn? In the lounge, Thales repeated the king's words and took a deep breath. Let me guess, your majesty. You will gather the power of the entire kingdom and pull up a strong and unstoppable regular royal army of more than 30,000 men. Equip them with the best equipment and provide them with the best logistics. Then, you will give me the kingdom's wrath in my left hand and the legendary wing in my right. Then, under my correct leadership, they will charge into Jade City from the left and right, simply and crudely but unstoppably, destroy Clarity Palace, and then drag Zayn Covendier from his dukedom throne, stuff him headfirst into the toilet bowl, and flush him into the moat? King Kessel was silent for a while. No. Thales let out a sneer of I knew it and said sarcastically, then, you must have planned a perfect plan to get rid of Zayn safely and quietly, without forcing the feudal vassals to rebel and causing Constellation to be destroyed in a civil war. That's why you have the confidence to order me around? After all, we should have learned something from the Sand King incident, and perhaps my little protest, right? The Iron Hand King glanced at him and turned to look at the desk. Open it. It took Thales a few seconds to realize that the other party was hinting at the scroll the king had brought. The prince pursed his lips to express his displeasure at Kessel's teasing, but he still went to the desk and picked up the scroll. He found that it was printed with the exclusive coat of arms of the Iris family. Warmly welcome. Duke Thales' reputation has spread far and wide. We had a pleasant conversation. It has been a long time since we last met. I rather miss you. Thales read the contents of the letter inattentively. Most of it was nonsense in a polite and genteel manner. Jade City may be small, Clarity Palace may be crude. The two families have a long history. The sages of the South Coast and I attend this grand event. Look forward to it. Thales finished reading the scroll. Just as he was feeling confused, he saw something on the desk under the scroll. He picked up the square frame, which he initially thought was a tray for the scroll. His expression suddenly changed. What is this? Thales raised his head and looked at the king in disbelief. As you can see, this is Duke Covendier's reply. Kessel V was still staring at the sparkling Star Lake. He welcomes his close friend, the Duke of Star Lake, to Jade City to stay at Clarity Palace and participate in the Jade celebration. He wishes to rejoice with the subjects and people of South Coast Hill, and to honor the deep friendship between Nine-Pointed Star and Iris Flowers, as well as the loyal bond between Renaissance Palace and Clarity Palace. No, I mean... Thales put down the scroll and raised the square frame, which was actually a miniature portrait, to face the king. He raised his voice and spoke in an inelegant manner. What the F***ck is this? King Kessel turned around. Under Thales' shocked and angry expression, a round-faced teenage girl in the picture frame in front of his chest turned her head around from among the flowers and smiled at the king. Her smile was sweet and innocent. On her tailored skirt, the iris emblem was faintly discernible. They must have changed the artist. It's not as good as the last one. The king only glanced at it and snorted unconcernedly. Don't worry. As usual, your portrait was also sent over. It's very fair. Fair? Thales only felt that his forehead was full of blood and was about to burst from his blood vessels. He took a deep breath and used all his strength to ensure that his volume would not break the window. I repeat for the last time. What the F***ck, this, F***ck, is, F***ck, what? Every time the prince cursed, the picture frame shook along with his fingers. The room was quiet for a few seconds. Nothing, King Kessel said casually. You need a reason to go to Jade City. For example, you are going to greet and take a look at one of your fiancés, Duke Zayan's sister, the Honorable and Noble Lady Hilly Covendier. The king glanced at him as if he was looking at a big idiot. Is there a problem? Yes. A very big problem. No one told me. Thales flipped over the portrait and stared at the round-faced girl in shock. Seely Covendier. Zayan's biological sister. Thinking of the Duke of Iris Flower's cold and sharp threat, Thales only felt the palm of his hand on the frame turn cold. What the hell? Okay, please correct me if I'm wrong. So the purpose of my trip, or in name, is to go to Jade City. For a blind date? Thales tried hard to adjust his emotions and forget the anger of being fooled. The letter won't be too straightforward. But, yes, when the young men and women of important families reach the age of marriage, they will take a look at each other, get to know each other, and it's best if they can cultivate friendship. This has been the kingdom's practice for many years. The king's tone was normal, as if no one should be surprised at all. Thales stared blankly at the girl in the painting. After a long while, he put Lady Hilly down and returned to the conversation with the king. Okay, I know that with your temperament, the possibility of this is very small, but I still want to ask. Thales swallowed hard, suddenly remembering the ultimate goal of his trip. You're not asking me to set up a marriage with that lady, and then let Zayan suddenly die, so that we can take advantage of the lady's inheritance and enjoy the fruits of her labor, and take South Coast Hill into our pocket? King Kessel snorted. His meaning was unclear, and it made Thales' heart skip a beat. 200 or 300 years ago, this would have been an effective method. But unfortunately, at least in Constellation, a simple family marriage is no longer the best way to seize power. Oh, how regrettable. Thales immediately breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that, but there was no regret on his face. It seems that my fate with that noble and pure Lady Hilly will end here. The king did not speak. He only narrowed his eyes and looked at him from afar. You know, after the incident at the royal banquet, Zayan and I have a new and old grudge, and we are as incompatible as fire and water. Thales sneered. And now I actually have to go to Jade City to ask for his hand in marriage. Okay, at least I have to visit his sister with the premise of a marriage alliance. This is great. He'll definitely think that I'm doing it on purpose, that I'm provoking him through his sister. With Little Flower's narrow-mindedness, it would be strange if she doesn't go crazy and mess with me. As Thales said this, he remembered something. His expression froze, and his words came to a halt. Provoking him through his sister. Messing with me like crazy. Wait. Thales' expression changed slightly. He picked up the scroll again. This is only Covendier's reply, so... The Duke of Star Lake widened his eyes and looked at the indifferent king in disbelief. Your Majesty, whether it's an engagement or a blind date, how long ago did you tell Zayan about me and his sister? King Kessel no longer looked at him, and his tone was indifferent. When it was confirmed that you had escaped from danger in Northland and were about to return to the capital, the House of Nobles selected a list of dozens of suitable noblewomen, inspected them one by one, and conveyed the intention of marriage alliance to their families, which naturally included Iris Flowers. What? Escaping from danger in Northland, returning to the capital, Thales's heart skipped a beat. That means. As far as I know, the Covendier girls live in seclusion, and their character and behavior are to be observed, so they were not originally high on that list. But now it just so happens that... Wait! Thales crossed his arms and stopped the king with a horrified expression. Wait, so, before the royal banquet, even before I returned to the country, you told Zayn that Renaissance Palace was interested in his sister? Thales stared at King Kessel. The king looked back at him, his eyes a deep blue. Not me, but you told him. Don't forget, Prince Thales is the one in charge of the marriage, so as to show sincerity. Sincerity. The more Thales listened, the more dazed he became. He looked at Miss Hilly on the desk. The king seemed to think that Thales was not annoying enough, and it's not a simple notice. This is an official note between great families, especially since the marriage alliance between the Jadestar and Covendier families has been going on for a long time. This is a very serious and sacred matter, and there is no room for ridicule or disrespect. No. F*CK. D*MN. D*MN. The youth seemed to have figured something out. He turned around and leaned weakly on the desk. I understand. The king did not seem surprised. He looked at his son calmly. Thales's breathing quickened. After a moment of realization, he said with a look of disbelief, I understand. At the royal banquet, the reason why Zayn facilitated Anchor Byral's kidnapping and assassination. At the royal banquet, Zayn's final words during their private confrontation rang in Thales's ears again. This is a warning. I came to you on purpose, Thales. I'm giving you one last chance. One last chance. Better to die for a friend than to perish for an enemy. Thales clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. That night, the reason why Zayn wanted to be the disruptor, the reason why he wanted to add fuel to the fire, the reason why he couldn't wait to find trouble with me, drag me down, watch me make a fool of myself, ruin my reputation. I want you to know, Thales. I want to teach you. This is my response. Thales rubbed his forehead in pain. And the reason why he still hated me so much after I returned to the country, the reason why he uncharacteristically bit me like a mad dog. As a response to you offending me, rejecting me, and even threatening me 6 years later. All these unreasonable attacks and framing to me, were not because he was out of his mind, or because he was some overbearing CEO, or even because he disliked me. Thales slapped his thigh regretfully. It was because in Zayn's eyes, I was the one who impatiently sent him a marriage alliance letter the moment I returned to the country, retaliated against him, threatened him, provoked him, offended him, and coveted his sister. Watch your hand, your highness. Ah! Having figured out the truth, Thales slammed the table in exasperation. F*CK. The Duke of Star Lake's indignant voice finally dissipated in the lounge. The king's figure was still standing by the window, motionless. Wait, you already know about these things, don't you? Thales thought of something and glared at King Kessel. Zayn refused to let go of me the moment we met at the royal banquet, and the reason why I was so unlucky in the end was because of this damned marriage partner you found for me? The prince's interrogative voice drifted in the lounge. Parents arrange marriages for their children, King Kessel said calmly and unapologetically. It's only right and proper. Yes, just like children arranging funerals for their parents. Hearing the king's nonchalant response, Thales was infuriated. Then I really have to thank all 8 generations of your ancestors. The unhappy teenager swore without scruples, without the slightest bearing and etiquette a duke should have. The king looked at him quietly. You're so grateful for your father's kindness. Thales spent a few seconds trying his best to expel the indignant anger from his chest. He forced a smile. Of course not. I was too agitated. Yes, I should have another way to thank you. Let me think. Yes, I've got it. Coincidentally, the toilet brush in my washroom is broken, father. The teenager's smile became more and more exaggerated and dazzling. You are so considerate and have such a hard skull. Are you interested in taking over its work? It's very simple. You just need to get into the toilet head first, and then turn it up, down, left and right. The king let out a sound that sounded like a snort and a laugh. It was unknown whether he was expressing his dissatisfaction with the duke's attitude, or really supporting his humor. After figuring out the cause and effect, the furious Thales sighed and waved his hands. But why? Why didn't anyone tell me about such a big thing like marriage? Gilbert should have informed you on the first day you returned and handed you the final shortlist, the king said calmly. Didn't he? Thales sneered and waved his hand without thinking. Nonsense. If he had told me, would I still be so? 14 years old. According to the standards of the empire, you are already a real adult, able to fight with a sword, marry a wife and have children. Gilbert, regarding this, as times change and society progresses, I believe we can discuss it. Thales remembered something, and his words came to a halt. So, Your Highness, you have reached the age this year. You must know that you have the duty to continue the bloodline of the great kingdom. Cough. Cough, cough, cough. Damn it, I remember now. He wanted to say it. Thales said in a daze. From the first day until the day of the banquet, he said it at least 3 times, but every time he said it, I interrupted him, rejected him and changed the topic. The king said nothing. Even on the day I turned against you, the reason he used to ease his anger was marriage. Thales tugged at his hair in agony. Damn it, I should have thought of it earlier. That's what he wanted to tell me. Gilbert, why are you so respectful and polite? Why do you give up every time I cough? Why can't you be a little more annoying and nag a little, or at least finish nagging me? The king snorted softly, and his tone was thought-provoking. Then, I guess you have nothing to complain about and can only take up the vacancy of the toilet brush yourself? Thales let go of his hair and glared at him fiercely. Then, he indignantly thought of another person. Damn it. Zayn Covendier. What warning, what response, all beating around the bush. He's a duke after all, why can't he be more straightforward? Thales gritted his teeth. Heh, Thales, why did you write to marry my sister? Was it a threat? No, Zayn, I didn't, I'm not, you're spouting nonsense. Oh, then it's fine. You go ahead and eat. I'll go get rid of that brother who barged into the banquet with a sword. Coercion, enticement, assassination, poisoning, or directly swinging an axe when we meet. Who should I work with and how should I do it? Let me make it clear, even if it's an act, I will never kiss Zayn's butt. But the king just looked at him quietly. You'll see when you get there. The Iron Hand King's answer made Thales frown. This answer won't work. Our covenant states that you will respect my wishes, listen to my advice, and treat me with sincerity, without reservation, without deceit. The teenager repeated. Anything. The king was silent for a few seconds, then sneered. Child, why do you think I put on the uniform of the royal guards and came to see you in private? Because the helmet looks better? King Kessel ignored Thales' sarcasm. He came in front of Thales and stared into the teenager's eyes. Our covenant is destined to be a top secret that cannot be revealed to outsiders, even to the kingdom's secret intelligence department. Even to the kingdom's secret intelligence department. Thales' eyes moved. In other words, Your Majesty, in their eyes, we are still a pair of father and son who have different opinions and are at odds with each other? But this is not a reason for you to hide the plan from me and keep your mouth shut. But the king shook his head. The plan of our oath is to gradually turn against each other and use this to win. You and I should distance ourselves from each other, not know each other well. If you know all the details of the operation, then your performance in Jade City will be different, and it will be hard to guarantee that no one will find out. As you said, Zayn has always been very wary of us. Thales frowned. In other words, I will be the same as before, unable to be ordered around, unable to cooperate with the secret intelligence department, and even less aware of their actions? Then how do I complete the mission? King Kessel turned around. Don't worry, you don't need to be the protagonist of this operation. What you need to do is just be a third party in Jade City, an impartial weight in the center of the scale. Listen, observe, witness and go with the flow. He only needs to listen, observe, witness, and go with the flow? Thales frowned. And this means a lot. Zayn, as a guardian duke, has been rooted in South Coast Hill for many years, and his power is unfathomable. But Thales, he doesn't need to do anything? The king pursed his lips slightly and his tone deepened. As for the rest, there will be others to do it. Others? Is he referring to the kingdom's secret intelligence department or something else? Thales' expression did not change. But what if, like before, I help but hinder them and mess up your plan? The king's expression changed and he glanced at him. This is why I am here. I am here to tell you what the ultimate goal is. As long as it is completed, I don't care what you do, whether you satisfy the Secret Intelligence Department or they satisfy you. What? King Kessel pushed open the door and stepped into the corridor. Thales was left behind, staring blankly at his disappearing figure. Mallows came in through the door and turned a blind eye to the unfamiliar guard who had just walked out of the room. Your Highness, if you are not feeling well, the watchman said calmly, we can end the banquet early. Thales snapped out of his daze. He touched his front pocket and glanced at the girl in the painting. No, there's no need. The prince's voice was calm, but there seemed to be worry between his brows. This is just the beginning. It was already nightfall. Sonia's hearty laughter rang out from outside the corridor again, mixing with the endless meowing of cats inside and outside the castle. The former was satisfied. The latter was strange and dreary. End of this chapter. Chapter 643. Late at night in Star Lake Castle, Thales sat alone on the observation deck on the top floor of Jackal Tower, looking down at Star Lake in the distance. King Kessel and Captain Adrian returned to the capital that very night, leaving only Sonia and her Starlight guards behind. They caused a huge ruckus in the main castle's banquet hall, and only calmed down at dawn. Mallows and Granny Valencia were in a terrible fix. As for the Duke of Star Lake, he had already returned to his bedroom with the excuse of being drunk. *T. I clearly saw him drinking juice. The fortress flower, who was drunkenly tugging at Mallow's collar. But only Thales knew that, compared to welcoming the king's visit, he would rather be drunk and unable to get up. A cat's meow came from the eaves in the distance, and the dog's barks on the ground responded to it. Coupled with the indistinct chirping of cicadas, Star Lake Castle under the moonlight was filled with a sense of wildness and contentment. Why? Thales stared at the sparkling waves on Star Lake, lost in thought. Why now? Why Zayan? Why South Coast Hill? Thales lowered his head and pulled out a dagger wrapped in heavy bandages from its sheath. After he escaped from the Great Desert, due to various reasons, he did not remove it. Instead, he strengthened the disguise on the JC's dagger to ensure that its origins would not be revealed. More importantly, why him? Thales casually took out the bone ring Gertoxa, and hung the dagger's tip on it. The ferocious bone ring and the sharp blade complemented each other, making it look even more desolate under the moonlight. What does Kessel V want him to do? Why is the king so confident and so lax? Where will Renaissance Palace start? How will they deal with the aftermath so that they can ensure the results without causing trouble? What is his role? What should he do? What can he do? Countless questions and doubts filled Thales' mind at the same time. There was light moving on the rapid shadow tower not far away. Thales knew that it was the patrolling sentry changing shifts. Looking at the figures, it might be Vanguard Supa Langley leading a team of local Jade Star private soldiers. The prince skillfully jumped off the observation deck and hid his body, waiting for the change to end. The patrolling sentry was more concerned about the threat outside the castle, but if one of them turned around in the middle of the night and saw the Duke of Star Lake's head, it would not be pleasant. Thales leaned against the wall, and his gaze froze. Well, at least he knew one thing. That was, he had to obey the king's orders, go to the Emerald City, and participate in this uncertain political conspiracy in any way. It was not only because he was bound by the oath, not only because he had a personal grudge against Zayan, not only because it was necessary. It was also because it was his choice, his right, and his bargaining chip. I have never. My experience in this area is still shallow. Even if I will definitely not be able to take it, and I won't be able to last long. But Sonia took a step forward, and her entire body was almost on Glover's body. She patted his shoulders with both hands. Don't worry, I will teach you. The fortress flower's eyes shone, and the curve of her lips became wider. Her tone also became stranger. And I will start from the beginning. I will demonstrate it myself, and I will teach you step by step. I will teach you step by step. Oh! Thales, who was eavesdropping from above, changed his expression several times. Is this what I should be listening to? Glover could not take it anymore. He pushed Sonia away abruptly, turned around, and struggled free. No, we can't do this. My lady, sir, this is against the rules. By the way, I still have a duty to be on duty tonight. Why don't we talk next time? But before he could take 2 steps, the fortress flower pressed her arm against the wall and blocked his way. But I want you. I really want you desperately. I want you now. Glover gulped, and his breathing quickened. Sonia, who reeked of alcohol, had a misty look in her eyes. She swayed and approached Glover. I know that you actually want me too, don't you? And I happen to be the commander of Broken Dragon Fortress, and I have the heavy responsibility of protecting the country. This means that it's not just me, but the entire kingdom wants you. The fortress flower had a smile that allowed no resistance. She forced Glover into a corner step by step. The latter's face, which had never changed in 10,000 years, was now filled with endless fear. Are you really not going to reconsider? What the F***ck Thales, who was eavesdropping on everything, rubbed his face. What the F***ck is going on? With complicated feelings, the prince crouched down below the watchtower. He made sure that they could not see him, then forced the sin of Hell's River to surge up his throat and mouth, extremely unwillingly, and adjusted the frequency. A few seconds later he pinched his nose, took a deep breath, and opened his mouth to speak. Meow, meow. The sound penetrated the obstruction and reverberated, as if it was right beside their ears. The fortress flower and Glover were shocked. The two of them separated abruptly and looked around. Meow. Thales continued to imitate a certain black cat who dared to speak harshly to Grandma Valencia. He vividly dragged out his voice and pretended to be a cat who was sleeping soundly and objected to being disturbed by humans. Glover finally got rid of his fear. When he thought of something, he immediately put on a stern expression. Ah, it's that damn black cat. It must have gone to the Duke's room to steal food and look at the confidential documents again. This is an urgent situation. It's very dangerous. Although I was considered a good hand among the farmers, and I was also known as a shrew in all the villages around here, and I even fought with wild boars and bandits with a pitchfork, among the men who came from all over the country to wield their swords, Sonia said faintly. In short, I screwed up. Among all the applicants, as the only woman, my results were the worst. I remember their gazes and mockery. And all my efforts were in vain. I proved to them once again that women are not suitable for the battlefield, and perhaps even more so, should not be soldiers. They can't do those fighting and killing things. I screwed up. Thales' breathing paused for a second. At that moment, the fortress flower, whose might shook the entire western peninsula, slowly raised her head. She stared at the bright moon and the starry sky in a daze. Her drunkenness seemed to have returned to her senses. All my dignity, persistence, and hope were shattered by the bloody reality the moment I walked into this unfamiliar world. Sonia turned her head to look at Thales and revealed a weak smile that did not match her identity as the fortress flower. Just like you. End of this chapter. At that moment, the eyes of the fortress flower before him were like torches that pierced through the fog and confusion. Don't listen to them, I was told. Even if you want to win their prizes, don't act according to their standards, don't act according to what they say, don't pretend to be a man, even if that is the only way you can prove to them, because if you do that, you will really lose. It was that night that I realized how stupid I was in the past. She turned to the pondering teenager. Thales, don't be stupid. Don't listen to them. Don't pretend. Thales clenched his fists. Don't listen to them. At that moment, he inexplicably thought of Quick Rope and the words the latter had said to him. Single quote. Don't play against him on the same chessboard, Thales, because you don't know how many tricks he has up his sleeves and how many cards he has up his sleeves. And those who are toyed with by their father without knowing it are extremely sad. Immediately after, Thales thought of Chapman Lampard. I'm not. I'm fighting, in my own way. Thales subconsciously opened his mouth to refute. Almost at the same time, he thought of the man whose gaze was as cold as ice and whose ice was burning with fire. Of course, you're not physically affected, but what about your brain? Sonia stared at him and extended her hand to point at Thales' chest. What about here? Thales did not speak. The scar on his chest where he was burned by a silver coin when he was young seemed to be burning slightly. A few swords originally only grew in one place. Sonia raised her cigarette again and said sarcastically, but the reality is that after thousands of years, they became something else. They're everywhere. They don't grow naturally, but they're man-made. Thales pursed his lips. What happened after that? He asked hoarsely. Sonia's gaze flickered. After that, I didn't risk my life to arm wrestle with them, compete in weightlifting, and compete in speed. There must be something, I thought. She narrowed her eyes, as though she was recalling the time when she was deep in thought. There must be something on this chessboard that they ignored, abandoned, and disapproved of for a long time, but I could pick it up and make use of it. Even though it was very difficult because this chessboard had belonged to them for too long, and the rules of the game had been set for them for too long, to the point that everyone felt that they were born that way. But I couldn't give up. No matter how loud they laughed, how nasty their curses were, what they used to stop me, what dirty jokes they used to set me up, how I slept with so many people to get close to the Duke, and how I almost wore out my crotch. What kind of joke is this? I'm the #1 shrew in the 6 great villages and towns. I've heard all kinds of dirty jokes, and kicked all kinds of ugly things. Unknowingly, the dark clouds gradually dispersed. She lifted her clothes to reveal the skin above her ribs, then pulled open her collar to reveal her shoulders and collarbone. And these? Thales was shocked. Those are scars. Oh my God. Under Sonia's clothes, from her abdomen to her back, from her shoulders to her neck, there were bumps and hollows everywhere. They were filled with crisscrossing scars from knives, arrows, and burns. There were also sunburn scars. The old and new skin were intertwined together, and the depth of the scars varied. This is the price for transforming from a farmer's daughter to the fortress flower? Thales stared at the scars on her body in a daze. After a while, he realized something and turned his face away in embarrassment. Yes, including these. You're also good-looking, based on other standards. The fortress flower furrowed her brows. She tied up her clothes and sized up Thales again. That's strange. You don't seem to be trying to smooth things over out of politeness, like saying things like, you look very heroic, or very unique. She scratched her head. Ever since my parents passed away, no one has ever praised me for being beautiful. My nanny even advised me to ignore my appearance. Damn it, it feels weird to be praised for being beautiful. Is this William's daily life in the Western Desert? Thales' expression darkened. No, I can guarantee that no one in the Western Desert would dare to praise the legendary Wing for being beautiful. At least not to her face. Thales coughed. Actually, just saying thank you will do. But he remembered something. No wonder. Thales sighed. No wonder King Nuvan, that stubborn old man, was willing to sit down and negotiate with Constellation during the Bloody Year. It was not because of Gilbert's glib tongue, nor was it because of the kingdom's wrath, which was terrifying and intimidating, nor was it because of my father's young soldier. It was because of you. Thales stared at her. It was because of Cold Castle that King Nuvan made his final decision and brought about the Fortress Treaty. Countless people in Constellation owe you a great debt of gratitude. But Sonia only smiled faintly and waved her hand. John once said that reputation is like shit in the Eastern Peninsula. Ahem, all right, it's nice to be praised occasionally. She scratched her chin and enjoyed the last few puffs of smoke. Seeing her like this, Thales could not help but feel sentimental. In comparison, his diplomatic mission to Extet 7 years ago to stop the flames of war seemed to be nothing. I have a question. Thales furrowed his brows. Both of you were promoted to nobility during the Bloody Year, and were generals who commanded the regular army for the royal family. Why was the kingdom's wrath and the legendary wing conferred the title of Baron, while you, Sonia Sasir, who made outstanding contributions, are just a lady? Yes, I'm also very curious. The Fortress Flower's face was full of mockery.